and welcome back to Mixed Media. We're here for another week of talking about some of our favorite things in the art and media spaces. We're your hosts for today and most weeks. And before we talk about Mixed Media, do some housekeeping, talk about our weeks and news and all that kind of stuff, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, in a company called Ariella.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Yeah, those of you who are watching right now, let us know if there are any audio issues. I don't know if I bumped my mic or something weird happened, but let us know if things are too loud, too quiet, whatever, and I'll adjust on the fly. And today we have a packed show. We've got a lot to talk about. If you don't know and you're just tuning in, I see some people flocking in. Some nice numbers coming in. Hello, people. If you don't know, I suffered through watching Oppenheimer again, another 3 hours. So just for this episode, so I've got a ton of notes to get through on the back half of the show, but I'll be talking about that later. Up front, Ben will be talking about something surprising, actually. Ben, if you want to explain. Give us a preview.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga's 2021 album, Love for Sale.
Yeah, cool.
Is that the actual album cover, or is that AI art?
It's AI art.
Yeah.
Okay, I was curious.
yeah.
Looked very AI-like to me, but I wasn't entirely sure.
I literally put Lady Gaga Love for Sale and just was like, okay, that looks cool. Just went with it. Yeah, so, and Nathan will be doing Arguing with Reddit as we usually do in between the two segments. So it'll be Love for Sale, Arguing with Reddit, and talk about Oppenheimer at the end. So that'll be the course for the show. If you're new to the show, what we do here is we talk about, art in all capacities, whether it's philosophy, news, reviews, hot takes, like all kinds of stuff. You can go through our vast catalog of very diverse topics by clicking on our channel icon. Highly recommend that you just put something random in the search bar, and we've probably talked about it at this point. So, yeah, definitely go check out those past episodes. And, we do this every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So, time might be changing, but that's what it is for now. A live stream podcast. So, how are you guys' weeks?
Oh, it looked like you're going to say something. Sorry. I can go. Yeah, I don't know. It was a pretty good week. I'm trying to think if anything notable happened. I don't think so. Yeah,
okay. But nothing bad happened, I hope.
Nothing bad happened, no.
Okay. So, a good week. Yeah, how about you, Nathan?
I bought a Barnes & Noble's membership.
Oh, so, I remember that talk about that.
Yeah, so my CD collection has expanded. So, I don't know what I showed last time. I don't know what I had. I think I had like F6, F7 now. I think I had 3 last time.
CDs, like music CDs?
Yeah, like CDs.
Nice.
So I just got this today, actually. This is Technicolor by Covet. I will say, not all CDs are built the same, and Covet has the best looking CDs. I don't know how well it's going to come off on camera, but it's very pretty CD.
Put it closer. Ah, okay. I see. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, and then their other one that I had before last time looks like this. Sorry if I'm audio only, you're hearing random noises, really. But the thing about these Covet CDs, though, is that not the standard CD like form factor. A little bit thinner. They're not in a plastic case. They're in a sort of like cardboard like.
I feel like that's more common these days.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so far, these are the only. Covet's the only band have CDs of that.
Okay.
Have it like this, because the other ones like.
Are they like a major? I've never heard of them. So
Covet is like major in a genre and a subgenre, I guess. They're not like major in general. Like if I asked someone, if someone on the street said they knew Covet, I'd be surprised randomly, you know.
So that makes sense. Yeah, I don't see it too often with like larger names, but assuming larger names even put out CDs these days, you know. Yeah. I think we mentioned this, but like last year is the first time in like 40 years that physical, you know, like album, you know, record sales were higher than CD sales.
Wow, that's crazy.
I don't know.
Yeah, the CD is kind of a dying. It's like in that awkward stage of like, it's old, but it's not old enough to be like it's me to crave, you know.
I'm starting that trend right now.
Yeah, see, the problem is my house. I'm literally like in my room right here. I'm swimming in CDs. So not all of them are mine, a lot of them are for my dad, but
yeah,
like, yeah.
The thing about like going back to the case, I'm not a big fan of this style. So I'm not a big fan of the style of like case, like the not like plastic thing, like the more, you know, whatever this is, because for one, it feels like it's gonna break very easily. I could definitely bend this like without even like, you know, not even trying.
Yeah.
It also stays open sometimes. Oh, this one's kind of staying closed, surprising. But kind of like a soft cover book, you know, how like once you open the book, the cover kind of just will always be open unless you like put something on top of it for a long time. So yeah, for the cases, what I will say, what is not a good case or not a good CD is, you've probably seen this before, right? This is a
Evanescence.
Oh yes, I'm pretty sure I might even have that like within arm's reach. That's a whole nother like story.
This is probably I knew I was getting into it. I knew this is such a classic album cover. I knew I've seen this before many times, you know. But it's probably my least favorite album cover of all time. I don't know what about it. It just I don't know. I look at it, I'm like, this just looks dumb.
It's like what year is it? Like 2001 or 2002?
I think it is 2001. Yes.
It's quintessentially like that.
Yeah. Look at the back of it. Wow. Look at
that. Yeah, I'm this is probably the second most influential album in like my musical career. That album.
Wow.
So,
really. Are you an Evanescence fan?
I was when I was in kindergarten.
Oh, I see. Oh, I think I left the CD in my computer. I was like, where did the CD go?
That's the whole like. That's a conversation for another day. Like, kindergarten Ben and Evanescence.
Interesting. That's not a pairing I thought I would hear. But and the CD.
No, that was like for me like that was like I remember I heard Evanescence, like I begged my mom for the CD, that CD, and like that's what I'm like. I heard him like, wow, I want to be a musician. Now I didn't use those words exactly. I'm like, I want to be that. But and I literally like 5-year-old Ben. I was like 5 or 6-year-old Ben. I was like trying to write songs. I even have some like fragments that I wrote back then that are like imitation, like 6-year-old Ben trying to. I had no idea what they're singing about. I just thought it was so cool.
Yeah, Evanescence is probably like, it's interesting. Good, you know, at least in rock, Evanescence has to be, you know, like, you know, top, you know, definitely top in terms of like modern rock, top, you know, most influential bands, right? Ever, like by far, you know, not number one by far, you know, but in the top 10 maybe or something like that for modern rock or something like that, right? It's interesting how it's found its way into your life like that. The CD looks equally as like, it's just nothing. There's nothing about it. It doesn't mean anything as far as I'm aware, you know?
It doesn't need to, though. It's in the right aesthetic.
I'm not a fan of the aesthetic personally.
99 Crime is in the chat. Shout out to 99 Crime, by the way. He's one of our local supporters. He's also said something else. He said, unreleased Costello classic waiting to be released.
Oh.
I mean, look, looking back on it, like, I'm actually really impressed by both the musical and the lyric skills of, like, 6-year-old Ben.
Well,
who had no idea. I didn't even know what I was writing. It was like a Evanescence style kind of, like, goth love song. Like, I'm 6 years old. Like, I didn't even know what the words I was writing meant. It just sounded nice, and like it just sounds kind of like in their style, sort of. And like, but it's actually not that bad. Like, relatively, it's kind of impressive.
Well, if we get 10,000 thumbs up on these videos, I'll force Ben to release an official copy of of his hidden masterpiece, Evanescence creation.
Wow.
I think it didn't have a title, but I guess if I had to take it like from the surviving lyrics, if I had to give it a title from that, it would probably be something like "Love Without Destruction."
Wow.
I think. Yeah.
Fitting,
This is
very
yeah.
Not Crisis, botting time to get to the 1,000 likes.
Oh, botting time.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, I will say, like, this is here. I have just picked up one from right behind my laptop. This is a Rachmaninoff, a couple, 4 CD set. Yeah, these things are indestructible, pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
But like, you take the paper-ish cardboard things, and like, like, well, assuming you have a car that like can play a CD, which modern cars don't, but
No, yeah.
like, you can try carrying that thing around, it will fall apart. Yes, I agree.
Well, I've got you've got one Evanescence. I raise you a Twilight DVD set.
Oh, wait. Why do you own the whole DVD set?
Oh,
Wait,
yes.
why-
All I don't remember how many films there are. Maybe 4. I think it's 3 films. The last one has 2 parts. But like I said, one day on Locals, whenever I have a little bit more time, one day on Locals, we're gonna do a watch along. Absolutely, we're gonna do a watch along to Twilight. It's gonna be the best thing ever. You're gonna get a director's commentary level of commentary of this film. Oh, it's gonna be a good time. But we can only do it on Locals because if I did this anywhere else, then they would take it down. Even though, in theory, it should be fair use because I'll be talking over the entire thing, providing value to all those who decide to join. Maybe we'll do like a group chat type deal. Let us know if you'd enjoy that. Yeah. Was the CDs the only thing, Nathan, or?
One more thing I'd like to say about this CD, despite it being hideous, in my opinion, I will say the content of the music, it is surprising when I heard it for the first time. Not the CD physically itself, just the album in general. When I listened to it on YouTube or whatever, right? How good of a how professional sounding of a first album it is for a rock band it was. I was like, oh, this sounds like this could be like their 4th album, you know what I'm saying? Like, it sounded very, I don't know. I was very surprised. I expected something a little bit more janky and, less polished, I guess. But,
I mean, it was a big hit, so, if it wasn't as polished as it was, it probably wouldn't have been the hit that inspired 5-year-old Ben.
Very true, very true. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't looked into these. Well, I guess one thing you get with the CDs is you get like these the booklets right at the front of it. I haven't actually looked at. I looked at the Linkin Park one, the Meteor one, but I haven't looked at the rest of them. So, yeah, these ones don't come.
I think the Evanescence just has the lyrics and like some more edgy pictures.
Wait, I gotta find these. Gotta find the edgy pictures. All right, let's slide it out. What do we have here? We have lyrics. Yep. And we have, oh my goodness, yes, we have some images.
This is the band just vibing, like this is how they normally are, just vibing in their, overexposed faces,
Yeah.
Obviously.
And then more lyrics, that's it, yeah. Yeah, I actually forgot, I watched a podcast, I think I got it originally from a YouTube recommended thing. And I listened to it in the car on like Apple Podcast, whatever it's called, of a podcast with Amy Lee, the singer, and really the only person who persists in the band, with a very strange Danica Patrick's podcast, who's like the race car driver, right?
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know she had one. I'm not a big fan of her as a podcaster, I guess, but I was more a fan of Amy Lee. I was trying to figure out what she had to say. And it's good to know that I guess something that I had never really thought about, which I guess should be kind of obvious maybe, is when she's making these songs, right? She's not actually that edgy, obviously. I don't think it's that possible to be that energy, obviously. But like it's like a very, you know, it's just that she chooses the things she wants to express are those feelings. You know what I'm saying? But her feelings, you know, she might be, you know, like you know, in general, might, you know, not always be, you know, mad depressed. You know what I'm saying? It's just that's what she chooses to express in songs. You get what I'm saying, right?
Well, it's like last week we were talking about the definition of melodrama.
Ah, yes.
It's like these things are all built on like real real feelings, and but kind of exaggted.
It's like a concentrated version, you know. It's like if that's only what you put into the song, you know.
Yeah.
I'll say one of my favorite memories related to that album was my grandparents at one point were like picking me up and like driving my parents' car, and so we had the CD. And like, grandparents, can we play this? And we listened to like the first song. My grandmother was horrified that like 6-year-old Ben like was singing along to this stuff, and you know, very like kind of quiet, pious, Polish Catholic, and she's like, "This is just not like moral for you, Ben." Like, it's okay though. Like the lead singer has in the like somewhere in the album, you know, art, she's like wearing a cross, so it's okay. And I don't think that convinced my grandmother at all. But that was like 6-year-old Ben trying to like say it's got some element of like, you know, Christianity in it.
Well, there is one song that is Tourniquet.
So,
which at least makes a direct reference to Christ. So, you know, it is a Christian rock band in some sense.
Lyric, so I don't think that made it. I don't think that went over my head. But yes, that was hilarious. I can remember this pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. My week. I don't remember anything in my week other than doing the Barbenheimer meme. The rest of the week might as well have not happened because, well, I set aside Sunday to do that. And, you know, it's like 5 hours of movie, so you're at least hoping that it's going to be fun, I would say, is kind of the desire, that if you're going to put yourself through 5 hours of movie, that you'll have fun at some point. Yeah, we're going to definitely talk about Oppenheimer the rest of this film, but real quick, Barbie is a really bad movie. Like, really, really awful. Like, colossally bad.
Everyone I know who's watched it says it's a really fun movie.
Well, so I'll give you the like what I do when I know I'm going to watch a film is I just don't consume anything about it because I know I'm going to watch it. I don't want to be tainted by the marketing. I don't want to be tainted by people's opinions. I want to come at it like with as fresh eyes as possible. It's the most enjoyable way to watch a film is to just, you know nothing about it, you know? So I'm just like, okay, everyone's doing the Barbenheimer meme, so let me just do the Barbenheimer meme. And so I'm like, okay, let's go watch some Barbie and see what it is. I had only seen, like, the shortest trailer. Like, I think it's the first trailer they released. It was, like, 30 seconds or something, or a minute. And I know Greta Gerwig because I've seen Lady Bird. And I've done a review on Lady Bird, which you can check out on the channel. I have a very positive opinion of that film and very interesting take on what that film means in the grand scheme of filmmakers. I was talking about postmodernism, and I was kind of hoping that we would get some of that in this film. I knew we weren't going to get like super deep. It's a Barbie movie, but like I expected there to be some postmodern commentary in this film that's interesting and that at least could like be intellectually fulfilling, even if it's not the most like, you know, profound thing in the world. And it was a downright corporatist garbage, you know, Mattel rebrand that everyone somehow fell for. It is the most nonsensical. No point that it makes in the film makes any sense internal to the movie itself. Like, 1 second it's telling you that Barbie is responsible for single-handedly responsible for oppressing all women and forcing them to have a negative image of self, and the next minute it's telling you that the founder of Barbie, who appears in the film, is who is a woman herself. The founder of Barbie is the best person ever, and that she's the moral underpinning of the whole story. Can you make those things make sense together? No, you cannot. But that's the kind of film that this is. It is a complete, utter garbage. Like, just, I don't know why I thought that it would be otherwise, but I hoped it would be otherwise. The only saving grace of that movie was that the art direction was phenomenal. Like, the sets were just insane. I couldn't even imagine making some of these sets, like, because they're making these things from scratch. Obviously, they're recreating, like, these doll houses and all this crazy stuff, and all of it has to be made from scratch, you know, in some studio. So that stuff was impressive. Colors were you know, it was pink vomit everywhere. In that sense, it was super fun. First 10 minutes were fun. And then after 10 minutes, it becomes just a violation of the soul. It's just, it's just so bad. So, yeah, I would not recommend that you punish yourself like I punished myself with Barbie. At least Oppenheimer, even though I really, as you'll see in the last segment of this show, Oppenheimer is kind of subtly propaganda, you know, pretty much. At least it's an intellectually fulfilling film. At least you can engage with it on that level, you know, and like it's a really great film, which is what great propaganda always is, and we have episodes about that. So there you go. That was that sums my week up. Is Barbenheimer was kind of a disappointment. So there you go. How about news?
Sure. So the Activision Blizzard, or the Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, you know, still on the court or whatever. I don't know. I stopped following it. I don't know, like the legal, like, you know, like what's going on legally. I don't know the specifics or whatever. But apparently it's moved forward somehow in the United States, but not elsewhere. And it seems like Sony has acquiesced and has taken a deal with Microsoft to that COD will be on PlayStation for at least the next 10 years. Which, if you recall, that deal was made before, but it was actually better before. It was there would be all games would be available from Activision Blizzard on PlayStation or something like that. Well, at least it might have been that none of them would be Xbox exclusives. I don't remember which one it was for 10 years or something like that. So it's got COD now, and that's interesting. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go next real quick because it relates to Barbenheimer. The only news I wanted to know really was the relative box office of each, and Barbie came in with a whopping opening take-in of $162 million, which is a fantastic pull. So Mattel did a great marketing campaign for their 50th movie among 100 movies. Apparently, they're already slated to make 47 new movies. Like, already contracted to make 47 new movies.
Wait, what is Mattel? Is it a movie company, or what is this?
No, Mattel is the toy company that makes Barbie.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Why do they make, like, have they always been making movies, or, like, where did this come from?
There have been, like, a number of Barbie movies, like, you know, they're all animated.
But, like, not like a bunch, right? Like, a few, right? Like,
no, a bunch.
No, there are a lot of... at one point, I talked about some of the music from Barbie and the Island Princess.
Oh, I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they make a bunch of, like, kids, like, animated movies, and they're kind of, like, straight-to-DVD kind of stuff.
They're kind of thing, like, if you have a younger sister, like I do, there are a lot of them lying around the house.
Yes. So
it's
they're
like
experienced.
They have, like, a Barbie everything. It's like a Barbie Nutcracker, a Barbie, you know, whatever.
Oh, okay. It's like a Magic Treehouse of Barbie, okay.
And now we have Barbie Margot Robbie feminist TM, you know, film. That's the way I'd put this one. Mattel is feminist TM is what we is the real point of this movie. Is Mattel is rebranding itself so that it can get away from the critiques it gets all the time by somehow simultaneously being feminist and taking no like making no changes. Like they're like, "Yay, we've acknowledged it. Now we can move on and buy more toys." Right? That's literally how the movie ends. I'm not even kidding. That's literally how the movie ends. It's crazy. One of the craziest films ever. Um, but apparently, it's worth $162 million on opening. The power of marketing, and Oppenheimer pulled in $82 million, which is a respectable number, but not anywhere near. I mean, Barbie pulled in double that number, so that's crazy. That's nuts. I would much rather see Oppenheimer. Huh?
Kekara says at least they're honest.
I don't. Honest is kind of a weird word in this case because it's kind of like, yeah, they acknowledge it, but they also expect you to like applaud them for it. It's a very disgusting, corporatist piece of garbage, masquerading for as a, I don't know, meaningful film. It's just terrible. It's a hateful movie too. It actually, there's a lot of hate in that movie. But yeah, it's bad. So very disappointing in Greta. So that's all the news I have.
And well, for me, my musical news will be part of my segment, so we'll save it for that.
Sweet. All right, well then I guess we better get at it since we've got an action-packed episode today. Oh, that was a mistake. Oh. I still have the old one in there. So if you like the segment, please stick around. We're going to have 3 more awesome segments coming right up. And hit the like button. Don't forget to do that. And don't forget to subscribe as well if you enjoy any of this. So now we're going to Ben's segment. Here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, a portion of Mixed Media Podcast devoted to all things related to music. With normally a emphasis on classical music and our media music in general, but sometimes we'll stray from that a little bit, like today. My name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer, and I'm for Mixed Media Music, and I'm assisted by my 2 co-hosts, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella. And I probably won't be talking very much because I'll be taking notes, and also I might cover my lens momentarily in a moment here. So forgive me if I do that.
Oh yeah, I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
All right. So if you have watched this podcast for a long time, and especially if you just watched our new segment or have been watching live along with us as we go through the entire show, well, you probably already got something you've never heard me talk about, which is 5 and 6-year-old Ben being obsessed with Evanescence and trying to write songs in the style of Evanescence. Well, in a sort of similar note, we're going to be talking today about the 2021 album by Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett, Love for Sale. Again, you probably didn't think you're going to hear Ben talk about this show, but here we are. Now, the reason we're going to talk about this album is because, fortunately, the other day, Tony Bennett died. And Tony Bennett, for those of you who are not familiar with him, is a really kind of important jazz vocalist, kind of that like we'll call him like the crooner style, sort of like a Frank Sinatra style. Frank Sinatra actually said that he thought that Tony Bennett was the best singer of all of us. Or sorry, yes, technically the quote is best singer in the business. So Tony Bennett now was in the news somewhat recently with the release of this album in 2021. He set a whole bunch of records as I think the longest time between number 1 hit and then like another number 1 hit. And I think it was like 62 years or something like that. I think he's also he was 95 when he released the album, so he also has the record for the oldest person to release an album of new of all original music. Um, Original, like, as in, not like just re-releasing old songs he's recorded. Obviously, none of his songs were written for this album. Um, yeah, and I think he has a couple of other like ridiculous age-related records like that. This is a guy, singing back in the late 40s and singing with Basie, Count Basie in the 50s and 60s and that kind of stuff. And then having a really strong second act, so to speak. So he just died the other day.
Wait, how old was he?
He's 96, but like only a few weeks from turning 97.
I don't know what to say, because you're talking about performing well in the 50s. I was like, oh, he might be a little bit older then.
Yeah, his first #1 hit was in 1951.
Wow, he's been out of the game for a long time.
Yeah. So just a few more things about Tony Bennett. So he first came to my attention when I saw this, when this album was released, that he'd set all of these records. And I have, we've talked a little bit about me and jazz and swing dancing. And because of that, I've been listening to a lot more jazz. So I've become more familiar with him and his work. It's kind of an interesting character too. I guess he, enlisted and fought in World War II as part of the, in the Battle of the Bulge. Started his singing career after he got back. Like I said, his first hit song was in 1951, a song called "Because of You." But then shortly after that, he really started. Because it was more of like a pop-ish song for pop at the time. Then he started becoming more jazz-oriented after that. His most famous song is the 1962 hit "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." I guess he struggled later in his career in like the 70s and late 60s, as rock and roll, like the British invasion, kind of put an end to a lot of jazz vocalists not selling very much, and so he basically lost all of his money, and he got kind of involved with drugs, and then kind of after almost dying from a cocaine overdose in 1979, decided to give that up and get back into singing. And basically he didn't stop from 1980 to his death. Or I guess he retired from singing at the end of 2021. But so really long and interesting career that he had. But I'm not going to go too much into him. The of note here, though, is that I guess in 2012 he was performing at some kind of like charity event that Lady Gaga was also performing at, and the two of them became very close friends somehow, somewhat ironically, perhaps. And they decided they wanted to do a couple of jazz albums together. So the first one was Cheek to Cheek in 2014. And I guess they really enjoyed singing with each other. So they performed live quite a bit as well. And then before they had started working on the second album, the Love for Sale, which is what we're going to talk about. I guess in 2016 he was diagnosed with very slow developing Alzheimer's, but he still went to the studio and continued performing, and finished this album, and then had a final live version of it with her in 2021. So it's also pretty impressive, being like in your mid 90s recording this stuff with Alzheimer's too. Even if it's kind of slow developing, like it's pretty impressive. Yeah. So again, this album It's well, there are a couple of solo songs for both Lady Gaga and for Tony Bennett, but mostly they're doing duets together. This is again his last musical work, and these are all Cole Porter songs. So of course, if you're a jazz singer or singers, right, and you are going to be singing Cole Porter, you're going to be compared to Ella Fitzgerald doing the Cole Porter Songbook. And if you are doing a male-female jazz duet album, you're going to be compared to Ella Fitzgerald singing her duets with Louis Armstrong. It's kind of inevitable. So I don't actually think that Ella and Louis recorded any of these songs in their duet recordings that are on Love for Sale, although Ella certainly sang many of these songs by herself. So some general thoughts. I mean, in general, this is a very good album if you enjoy the American, the Great American Songbook, that kind of jazz standard stuff. It's actually a really good album. I quite enjoyed listening to it. I was inspired to listen to it when I saw that Tony Bennett died the other day. So, yes, it's inevitably we're gonna have to compare it to Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong, but what's important to know is that they have Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett have really, really fantastic chemistry, despite multiple generations and general stylistic differences. They have really great singing together. The way that they approach this sort of music is very similar. It may not totally be to your taste, but the fact that they are so in sync with each other, it's really, really impressive. Now, so you can tell that they're having a lot of fun when they're singing, and the music videos for a lot of his songs are also really fantastic. They're not like traditional music videos; they're just kind of artfully done videos of them performing in the studio or recording in the studio. Really interesting. They're just the way that they interact with each other is also really fascinating. And that's kind of important because for this kind of stuff, this is fun music, right? And you got to have some fun while you're performing it. Something like if you listen to Ella Fitzgerald or Ella with Louis, they're having lots of fun, which is why they're some of my favorite musicians to listen to for any kind of regardless of style. Just you want to listen to great musicians. I love listening to Ella Fitzgerald, right? Someone who just has so much fun while being in total control of what she's doing. So in contrast to some of these really famous Ella Fitzgerald and Ella and Louis recordings, they're far cleaner and more precise, and relatively, I'd say that it's almost a little squarer in how they do things. Now, to me, what that means is that there's some improv and there's some especially lyrical improv that they're doing, which is fun. And there's some really interesting instances of that in particular songs. Changing around the lyrics that Cole Porter wrote. But they're not doing as much rhythmic play as Ella Fitzgerald or Louis Armstrong do together. Now, that is partially kind of the style that Tony Bennett is coming from, right? He's more in line of someone like Frank Sinatra, who does do some rhythmic, playing around displacement for kind of cool jazzy effect, but doesn't do it that much, not nearly as much as Ella and Louis do. Also, one of the trademarks of Louis Armstrong is the originator of scat singing. Ella Fitzgerald, kind of one of the greatest practitioners of that. So they like doing a lot of scat singing or scatting, whereas there's none of that in Love for Sale. I guess I should clarify, if you're not familiar with the term scat singing or scatting, is what jazz vocalists call, or what we call when jazz vocalists are basically kind of doing like improv in the manner of like an instrumentalist, but instead of just making up phrases and notes, but they just kind of use nonsense syllables, without any thought out lyrics. So that's scatting or scat singing. So there's none of that in Love for Sale. Again, not really part of that like male crooner sort of style, but what that Tony Bennett is coming from. But they sing, Bennett and Lady Gaga sing really, really well together. And honestly, in comparison to the great Ella and Lewis duets, I think Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett are closer to each other in their general styles, like the way that they approach phrasing and whatever. I think they're actually closer, and they're better at singing in harmony with each other. They're trying to be really precise with their harmony, more precise than the kind of loose rhythmic and melodic style of Ella and Lewis. Now the production value, it's kind of a very heavily produced studio thing, like using all live musicians, mostly kind of small jazz groups, sometimes with a little bit of strings and flute and oboe, but it's maybe it's a little bit too clean and processed for me sometimes, in comparison to like some jazz singing recordings from the 50s and 60s. It's just it's a little bit too crisp and clean at the edges, in my opinion. I would say that in general, Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett are better at faster things, but where they, I think they actually outperform in some ways, like the Lewis and Ella duets, is in like the slower, really ballad style stuff. I think they're just better at having like a kind of more, they're fitting into more like a really sentimental kind of song. So yeah, they do really well with those things. Like I said, the music videos are a lot of fun as well, so you should definitely watch those. You can really see the chemistry between Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. I'm just gonna quickly run through the songs on the album. I'll note a couple of things too. Not that anybody is listening to this, but for future reference, for people I know in the Lindy Hop East Coast swing community, some of these songs on this album could easily be played and danced to. Not all of them. Some of them are more blues dancing. Some of the slower things. Yeah. So the first song is "It's the Lovely," and it's probably the best lyrical improv on the album. Kind of starts with Lady Gaga singing like, I don't really like she's paraphrasing slightly, but it's like basically, I don't really like the lines of this first verse, so I'm just going to make something up until we get to the chorus, and then we can actually sing the song. It's kind of paraphrasing what she says, and that's kind of fun because hearkening to the late 50s and 60s recordings that Ella Fitzgerald did, her live performances, where she really does do a lot of stuff like that. Like, oh, I forgot the next line in the song, so I'm just going to make up another line, but I'm still singing the right melody. It's a lot
original
of
freestyle.
Yeah, no. Oh, the Ella Fitzgerald's live recordings of things like Mac the Knife or Bill Bailey, where she's going off the rails with this, making up lyrics like that. It's a lot of fun. So some semblance of that there. It's just a fun, bouncing tune. This is a good one for to do Lindy Hop too. The second song is Night and Day. For me, I'd say the studio strings sound kind of bothers me. It just feels a little bit too like precise and overproduced in it, the mixing and mastering of it. But I really do like the sound of the flutes in it. That's kind of a slower song, pretty little song. The title song, "Love for Sale," kind of entertaining lyrics. It's about a guy advertising the local brothel. Just the two of them just really playing off of each other very well. So just musically for that, it's a lot of fun to listen to. I'd say too that interestingly that I don't know that much Lady Gaga. I remember her mostly from like things like Poker Face back in like 2009 or something. But she does a really good job with like slower, really sultry kind of openings to songs before the songs get faster. And they do a lot of that in the way they arrange these songs. She's really good at that. Like she actually has a really nice kind of jazzy voice for this sort of stuff. Now, it's maybe a little bit like smooth and lacking some of the like freedom that Ella Fitzgerald has in same sort of places where she'll just kind of, add little like melodic flourishes to things. But I think it works really well. So it's quite interesting. Fourth song is "Do I Love You," and the song itself is a pretty sweet song. I'm not a huge fan of the contrast between like the strings and the solo guitar, and that's a song that Lady Gaga does by herself. I think the best song on the album is the fifth track, "I've Got You Under My Skin." It's just a really nice, relaxed swing. I think it's probably the one on this album where where they're most, just kind of at ease and comfortable in the groove. And it's interesting too that I guess they have some really personal, like they do add a couple of like lyrics interjections and like laughing at at each other in there, and some of the like additions they make or interjections they make are really like personal about things that are very between the two of them that I'm not going to go into, but you can read about it yourself. It's kind of very sweet. So I'd say that's the best song on the album. Definitely, that's a good song for dancing if you're into swing dancing. The sixth track is "I Concentrate on You," and it's kind of got a Latin swing feel. But it's not familiar with that song. I quite enjoyed it. Seventh track is "I Get a Kick Out of You," and I think if anything, that's got the best music video, or like studio recording video, so to speak. It's like classic song, one of the songs that I grew up with, my mom was singing. And so again, they're just having a lot of fun together. Like their duet chemistry is quite on full display there. It's very nice to see. Tony Bennett has a solo on the track "So in Love." Nothing terribly remarkable on that one to me. I mean, his singing is great, but not really remarkable arrangement. Lady Gaga has a second solo called "Let's Do It," and again, it's interesting because this is kind of more of an up-tempo song with kind of somewhat suggestive for like 1930s lyrics, but she does a really good job of like getting into that kind of swing and in the kind of the mood that the song requires. So quite interesting to hear a very pop style singer kind of doing such a great job with that. I feel like though it's a song that could use a little bit more rhythmic play than I don't think there's really any that she does. And then the last song, there are 2 more songs on like the extended version of the album, but the last song of the regular album is Dream Dancing, which is a very sweet song about like dreaming about the person that you love, and dancing with them in your dreams and not wanting to wake up. And again, it just, the way that they sing together, just they're so like in tune with, you know, the way that they each sing. They're so in tune with each other's styles, and it just works very well. It's very, very effective and very, very sweet ending, and kind of sweet ending to his Tony Bennett's long career. So that's kind of my, kind of keep it quick, my quick kind of rundown of this album. I definitely recommend listening to it, even if you're not a huge fan of you know, Great American Songbook kind of singing, or jazz music in general, or even if you're someone like me who's not really a fan of Lady Gaga at all. It's interesting to hear her sing this kind of stuff and do a really good job with it.
99 Crime says, I get a kick out of you as a banger standard.
Yeah, it's good. And they do a really great job with it. It's quite fun. Although, like I said, I think if I had to just pick one song from this album, I'd go with "I've Got You Under My Skin."
For the music videos, I assume those aren't like the recording that they play isn't from that specific video, right?
I would imagine not, because there's a lot of cutting and like that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I remember I've watched a similar music video. That was kind of like that. I don't know. I got odd vibes from it, I guess, like because it's like what I was seeing wasn't matching what I was hearing. If you get what I'm saying.
Oh,
you know?
Actually, so what's interesting is that the music video version, it's actually like different than the album version. So I'd actually guess that what they're probably doing is they may actually have recorded it, been singing live while they did the video, and then they just added like extra extra clips, like, you know, and cut away from like the live performance. I do suspect that they actually did record them in the studios, like long.
Gotcha. That reminds me, something that is a little bit off topic, but something I recently realized was one on the Evanescence CD that I bought. There is the song "My Immortal." I've had I've heard that many times before, right? And it's like ingrained in my mind or whatever, right? But then when you listen to it on the album, it's different. And I was like, oh, this is not the same thing as like the YouTube music video version or whatever. And then on an album that I actually bought, it's in the mail right now. I didn't realize that it arrived, so I could have shown that off, but I don't have it at the moment. Called "Currents" by Tame Impala. The album version I know is significantly longer than the music video version, which is interesting. I'm not entirely sure why that would be the case. Why didn't just make it the same song? But
probably because it's easier to do a shorter version.
Oh yeah, that is true.
Like all of the album versions on this album are longer than the music video versions.
I see.
Yeah,
nice.
So that's all I have.
Sweet.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it makes me want to check it out for sure myself. Cool.
Yeah, it's a fun. I think it's a fun listen, in honor of Tony Bennett.
Awesome. Cool. Then shall we go to arguing with Reddit?
Sure. Can I get a glass of water real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
I said a glass of water. I don't drink a glass of water, but this is a common phrase. I'll be back.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Actually, has anyone in the audience listened to this already? Are you familiar with this work here? Let us know in the comments of how you feel about it.
I will say I like this more than their first album together, Cheek to Cheek. I think that's the first album to me is a little more like frantic, and they're not quite as like quite as comfortable with each other as they are in this.
Interesting. Yeah, how old was he when he died?
He's like 2 weeks or 3 weeks from turning 97.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say he had to be pretty old from what you were saying.
Yeah. Veteran of the Battle of the Bulge and whatever. You have to be pretty old.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That's pretty nuts.
Although, back in Los Angeles, there's the guy who comes to a lot of the swing dancing events that I go to. I don't know what his real name is, but he's universally known as Bazooka Joe. He's 104 years old. Used bazookas in World War II, and that's hence his nickname. And he still dances, at 104 years old. I mean, and you can tell it's such a sharp sense of rhythm too. Like you can tell that back in 1945, whatever, he must have been like an incredible dancer to the same music.
Yeah. I don't think that'll be me. 104. Yeah, that's pretty cool though. All right, Nathan, you ready now?
I'm good.
You froze for a second.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, okay, now you're back. All right.
Right.
So here we go to the gaming segment. 3, 2, 1.
Mixed Media Gaming.
Welcome to the gaming segment of the Mixed Media Podcast. Today is an Arguing with Reddit segment. So, I'll be looking at some hot takes on Reddit. Agreeing or disagreeing, we'll see. 2 of them, there'll be 3. 2 of them I haven't seen before. 1 of them I have because I chose it myself. That's how it works.
Yeah, pretty simple. All right, let me pull the first one out here. And the first one, I'll do my own here. So this one's from r/gaming. I should have put it into the browser first. Hold on. Let me pull it up here. And pretty much this one's about how to get people to review your game, basically. So it's more like an advice solicitation type post. So here it is. So it says, what makes people review your game? A deep dive into Steam sales / review ratio. This person published a detailed article. I guess I can click it if you want to. But the summary is, the year of release, it is already well known that the ratio of sales to reviews depends on the year your game was released, or more precisely, your review was released in 2019. Steam started asking players to leave reviews. Okay, that's kind of non-news. That kind of makes sense. Price is another factor that affects the sales review ratio. Generally, cheaper games have more sales per review. And percent of positive reviews. Games with lower review scores have higher review / sale ratios. And I should click here. Genres. There is more correlation between games or between genres and sales / review ratios. Let's see. Yeah, you can filter out like hobby and shovelware, and then it gets more accurate. Playing time affects it. Indie versus AAA affects it. Demographics affect it. Everyone can read what's on the screen. So I just thought it was interesting. I wanted to get your take.
Didn't the person just answer their own question? They seem to have a lot of. They seem to actually know the answer.
Yeah, I guess they do. It's more of like a, did you know these things and how do you feel about them, I guess.
Year of release, I mean, I actually didn't know that. He said it's already well known, but I was not aware, I guess. So I guess, I don't know. I actually didn't know that, I don't think I've ever witnessed Steam asking me to review a game. Why has that happened? I don't know where that would appear. I wonder if maybe you go back to the store page of the game that you bought. Maybe it'll ask you. I'm not sure.
Does it ask you? Does it maybe give you a message when you first create a Steam account that says you should review games that you play? Is that what it means? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I've never seen a message like that myself. So if I have, I missed it. So I'm not sure. But I guess I'll take his word on it. I guess that's a thing. I don't know. Cannot confirm, nor deny. I guess. Price. Generally, cheaper games have more sales per review, so that means the worst review ratio, more sales per review. That would make sense to me intuitively because a more expensive game is a higher investment. So I feel like you're more likely to, especially if you dislike the game, you're more likely to complain about it. You know, if you spent more money on it or whatever. Also, something I didn't know. I didn't know it was a thing as well. One thing I did know was the genre thing, that there are certain types of games. And while you're reading the initial part of it, I was like the little essentially what it's about generally. I was like, I remember reading a marketing article about certain genres attracting more reviews, but I couldn't remember what types of games they were. I wish the person said it so that I could potentially, remind me or whatever. But yeah, there are certain genres that have more reviews than other types of games. I mean, if the question is just what makes people review your game, then that's the answer. If it's like more so a person is also wondering like, what can I do to make people review my game, I wouldn't recommend like just changing the genre of your game for that reason alone. Maybe there's some maybe it makes some sense to think about, okay, well, this genre has like almost no reviews, whatever, and consider that like just note that it'd be harder to get reviews in the genre, right? So it'd be harder to gain traction essentially. But yeah, I don't know about like choosing a genre for reviews or whatever. Playing time, this intuitively makes sense to me. It's like just play a game longer, more likely to write a review. That intuitively makes sense to me, except in cases where like people have a very visceral negative reaction at the start when they start playing it, and they leave, you see the negative review with 0.8 hours on the game or something like that. I guess that those would be outliers, I guess. So I wonder if it's more like negative reviews. I guess that would make sense that negative reviews might be more correlated with shorter playtime than positive reviews. Because if you think about it, if you don't like a game, you're not likely to play it for like dozens of hours, right?
Yeah.
If you play a game, you're likely to play it for dozens of hours. And I wonder because just look, not that I've done the statistics or whatever, but just looking at games, typically most games have a greater than 50% positive to negative review, which would mean that would skew more towards longer playtime rather than shorter playtime, right? So I don't know if it's that like literally the longer. If you were to adjust by negative, and if you were to weight it by negative and positive, I wonder if it would still be the same. That it's actually the longer you play is the more likely you are to leave a review and not the shorter. It probably just depends on the type of review, right? And certainly the type of game too, because certain games have a limit to how long you can play them, and others are a lot more open-ended. So, yeah. Indie versus AAA. Indie games generally have more reviews per sale. That's a reviews per sale. Wait, did you flip the way you said? Did you say the other way before? Sale, yeah, I said it the other way. I confused me for a moment. Okay, this is good. More reviews per sale is good. Yes. I don't know why that'd be. I don't know. Is it that like? I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's that players of indie games tend to be more closely connected to the people who actually create the game, maybe, and maybe they feel that they have more impact if they review something than if it's like a AAA studio or something like that. I'm not entirely sure why that would be. Demographics. This was a question. Do players from certain countries rate reviews more than others? I actually don't know, but I would guess yes. Obviously, it's like culture is just different in different places of the world, right? There's also things like language. Like if I was playing like a Japanese game and I wanted my views to be heard, I don't know if I'd feel very heard if I wrote my review in English. I don't know how well that would go. Even if the game is translated into English, that just means that they hire someone to translate the game to English, not that they have a full-time English staff, who's going to be reading reviews and stuff like that and relaying that to developers and stuff. So. Yeah, I would assume that certain countries write more reviews than others. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. This next one is from you, Nathan, if you want to explain.
Oh, wait, Keiharu says something about reviews. I've had Steam mention it when I'm on the game page in my library. Really? I don't know if I just never noticed it, or like I don't get it shown to it specifically or something like that. I don't know why that'd be. Or at least ask if I recommend it, which ends up being a review. Oh wait, this sounds familiar actually. This might actually be a thing that I've always like just ignored. I feel like I might recall something like that. I'll have to, after the podcast, I'll have to check my Steam page and see if that's a thing on my Steam page. Yeah.
Cool. This next one is from you, Nathan, if you want to explain.
Oh yeah, the browser games provide a sense of community. I'm waiting for it to show up on YouTube for me to read the thing, the full thing. But yeah, I chose this one because it kind of like hit home in a way because my introduction to gaming was browser gaming, and I found an odd sense of community. Now this might not be like a surprise to people who played like on like Newgrounds and stuff like that, which I was never part of that. I never used Newgrounds. I was aware of its existence, and I'm aware that a lot of people find community through that. But yeah, I don't know if that still exists. I think it does, but I don't know. But yeah, I never went on that. I was on the site a couple times for random games. But so I can see it now. So it says, being a starting game dev, I'm looking to form a community around my name and around my game development journey. Since I'm still in school, monetization is not of considerable importance. I've been told browser games can provide large revenue, but that's not what I'm interested in right now. I'm actually curious. I have no idea what the browser game market looks like in terms of revenue, because some of it's ad-based, which doesn't bode well for revenue, I feel like. Some of it's not non-ad-based and has like in-game purchases. And I've never heard of a single browser game you have to pay for, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if that's like... I guess because of the very nature of a browser game, it would be incredible... Well, yeah, it'd be incredible... Well, I would say it'd be very easy to get around that. I don't know. I'm not sure why that doesn't exist. Maybe it's like the I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's like the sort of target audience of the browser game. I suppose, like kind of like in mobile games, a lot of them are just free, right? Like 99% of them are free. The target audience of mobile games is not people who will pay for mobile games, pretty much. For the average mobile game company, I'm sure there are some that specifically target people who are looking for a more, polished experience and are willing to pay, a couple bucks or whatever, So I don't know. Maybe there are some couple dollar browser games, but that's besides the point. That's not that's not relevant. So yeah, back in the day, there are a few browser games that I frequented. Right, one of them was Congregate.com, which unfortunately, since the Flash game apocalypse, it is not really it's not the same as it used to be. But back then, we played a whole ton of browser games, and the interesting thing is they had a chat room on the right side of the screen, right? There's a little chat box, and there's a bunch of chat rooms. You just talk to people, like random people. It was very strange, and it wasn't like it was people playing the same game as you. Although some larger games did have their own chat rooms, it was like you can talk to anyone playing any game at all, right? It's just, the chat room is globally on Congregate or whatever, right? So that was an interesting community, I guess, that I stumbled into somehow. That's kind of why I was like, oh man, like yeah. I mean, I was curious. Like, I wonder if the inherent difference in platform changes the likelihood of having community. Because if you think about it, like if you go on Steam or whatever, right? Steam's like community version of community is not very upfront, right? It's not very in the open. If it took the average Steam player, I would doubt they're in any sort of, or they might be in a Steam group, but they might not actually participate in it or whatever. If you don't know, Steam groups are like essentially you can create a group and then people can join the group, and then there's like I think they have you can create like forums and stuff like that. I don't know how sometimes people use them for various games and stuff like that, but I feel like it's pretty rare to actually use it. So yeah, Steam doesn't really inherently have much of a community in terms of direct interaction. There is, of course, like the community of like the Steam Workshop or something like that, right? Which is like I think is not exactly what the post is getting at. I don't think talking more like something that's more useful for getting a crowd around you, your name, as he says, and the game you're playing, right? And I don't think Steam creates tools to let you Steam wouldn't be like a Discord replacement, if that makes sense, right? Or whatever, right? That being said, on the browser game front, right, I don't think Congregate would be either, but it's interesting that Congregate actually probably has a better sort of direct messaging type thing that was actually pretty effective and had tons of people talking on it at all times. But yeah, I mean, here, I think Congregate is also a outlier in that I don't know of any other browser game platforms that really had a strong sense of community other than Newgrounds. So I'm sure, even within the browser game sphere, I would say it's probably website to website. You know what I'm saying? It's not like if you release your game on notdoppler.com, you're not getting a community. There's no way to do that. You know, there's no chat room or anything like that. I don't even know the website still exists. That might be also gone. I don't know. But yeah, that's my thought.
Cool. All right, and the last one comes from Ben, if you want to explain.
Yeah, so this person just asks, basically, is this a good story plot for my game? Okay, so I'm just going to read it because it's pretty short. Basically, the hero was hired by a royal figure to collect gemstones from the kingdom's energy, but the villain also wants them, and is not hired by the king. Stuff happens, and by the near end of the game, the villain contacts the royal because the powerful gemstone the hero needs to beat the villain is in the royal's possession, and the royal agrees to fight the hero with their army to stop them from taking it. The hero wins. The royal allies with the villain sometime in the late game. Does this make sense as a sort of twist, or as anything?
So, out of all the domains in video game development, narrative is the thing I know least about. I have no clue what goes on in that space. I don't know how to write a story. The only thing I know is what comes from this podcast. So when I've come up with stories for video games in my mind, like, it's always function over form. So it's always like, here are some game mechanics that I like. How can I facilitate that in a story? Like, how can I make that make sense in a universe? It's never like, oh, here's a cool universe. How can I construct a game around that? You know, the story would always come last or whatever. And even then, you know, the story is definitely on the back burner. It's not like it's not a story based, not a story driven game. You know, it'd just be like just the setting and, you know, the environment around it. Probably the most story I ever thought of was a game that was kind of like like akin to to the Portal series, I guess, where it's like there is a story, there's a clear progression of events or whatever, but it's very confined to a small area. So there's not like there's, you know, tons of characters, whatever, you know, or tons of environments. It's a very small thing, and yeah, it wasn't very complicated at all, I guess. So I don't know. Is this a good story point? I mean, I can't. There's nothing here that immediately, because I am a function of reformed person in terms of video game story. There's nothing here that immediately screams to me, oh, here's like some game mechanics that would be really cool for this game. So I like how this stuff happens. That's a pretty good part of it. At the end of the game, the villain contacts the royal because the powerful gem here needs to be okay. He agrees to fight with the hero. I mean, the hero does win. The royal allies with the villains and
Well, you hope the hero wins. Isn't that kind of the point of the game?
Right. The royal allies with the villain sometime in the late game. Does this make sense? I mean, you know, Irving, I'm going to defer to you. What do you think about this story?
I mean, let's see here.
Add more details in the comments if you want extra details that really aren't that helpful.
Yeah, stuff happens is kind of a vague. The stuff happens part is the most dangerous part of this whole thing, I think, so far, because that's kind of like the middle happens, and that's always an issue when you're like, yeah, we'll put some filler in between, and then we'll get to the twist, obviously. Like, you know, that's very dangerous.
I guess if you read the comment, concerned with, like, should there be a twist or not? Does the twist itself make sense?
Well, see, the villain contacts the royal because the powerful gem needs to beat the agrees to fight the hero with their army to stop them. Wait, so I don't. What is really the twist? Like,
Okay, so if you go down to one of the comments,
It's that the royal switches sides, right? That's the twist.
yeah, the royal basically decides to. Yeah, he goes. Says
the
the
twist is
villain's
so
got a
vague.
thing to work on that already has a powerful power source and doesn't need the gems that he has. The royal had the stone because it's been in his family's crown for centuries, because it was a symbol of immortality, and they didn't know that these gems had magical power at the time. The hero wants them because nothing will be able to stop the without all these gems. He can't stop the villain, and yeah.
I mean, I guess there's not really a reason given, and that's kind of the problem. I mean, you have to have a reason for whatever happened. Is there a reason given for like why? Like
The royal guy just wants gems.
yeah,
The villain has gems
right.
and only wants the one gem that the king has the king doesn't care about. And you need gems so you can defeat the villain.
Every time I'm picturing this in my mind, I don't know why I keep thinking of Clash Royale. Like, I don't know why.
Kai says, "Okay, so this is Sonic the Hedgehog." I mean, I guess the thing is like it's all about like how it's presented. Because if that's all the detail there is, and that's all you're going for, but then the game itself is a very simple experience, then like, I mean, like Sonic the Hedgehog, you can kind of just.
The person at the bottom said it sounds like Fire Emblem. The funny part is how we've gone from Sonic the Hedgehog to Fire Emblem in the same description.
I didn't
I guess we
even
can
realize
just-
Sonic the Hedgehog had a plot.
There's a story to it, I'm pretty sure. I mean, okay. I've played Sonic before. I don't know why it's a children's game. I don't know if I'm really bad at it. It is incredibly hard to me. I don't know if this is me, but I find it really hard to go fast. Within the end of the game, it's easy to beat it, but it's hard to go fast. But the very vague story I know is that there's a guy named Dr. Eggman who's not actually named Dr. Eggman. His name's something else, but people call him that ubiquitously because that's what he looks like. And he doesn't like Sonic, and something about rings and going fast. That's what I understand.
Kara says Sonic is hard.
Yeah.
And he says they're powerful gems and they're important. Oh, he says I don't think the twist fits. I guess referring to the game in
What
question.
fits what? There's nothing to fit into because there's nothing like there. You know what I'm saying?
Right, that's what I'm
Like,
saying. Like I'm having difficulty here because I'm like, I mean, if you built the right thing around it, I guess you could make it work. But my big question is like, it's going to take a big leap for me to understand why someone would, instead of just stopping the original request, is going to then fight his own creation. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe there could be a reason for that, right? Like, but I don't know.
There almost certainly could be a reason. Like, there's, like,
Yeah.
it's so open ended. There could definitely be many reasons, But it's just like,
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't inherently make sense, but but it could make sense in some circumstance. But if you want to just hand wave it away, I mean, there are circumstances, obviously in films too, like where like you could just have a silly, dumb thing, where it's just like, yeah, just because. But like, it has to be. You have to earn that, right? You can't just like. You can't just like say we're gonna put you through, for a movie's sake, like an hour and a half or 2 hours of terribleness and expect you to just also expect it to, also accept a terrible plot design on top of it, like cherry on top, and that makes it amazing. I assume for a game the same thing would apply. Like you kind of have to earn the silliness if that's what you're going for. So I don't really know.
Got
Kai
some more
says,
comments.
oh yeah, go ahead.
909 Crime. Games have stories, but the main Sonic draws the vibes. I agree, Sonic is hard. Hey, Kairos, sorry, I was referring to Sonic the Hedgehog as making the twist not making sense. To be honest, we should have a mixed media jam where the game has to adapt to this synopsis. And 909 Crime. What if the rail got hit with a greed spell by the big bad guy and it gets worse and worse over the plot of the game, film, whatever, culminating in his betrayal. That could be cool.
It'll be a card game where the main antagonist is the pot of greed.
That's a Yu-Gi-Oh joke.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Maybe. Oh, I should totally do an episode on Yu-Gi-Oh Bridged. I should do a review of Yu-Gi-Oh Bridged. That'd be a fun episode. That's for the future.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't it just like, I have some magical ancient Egyptian contraption that will steal your soul?
None of it makes sense. Let's not even try to summarize the show. It is so. That's
all I remember about it. It's a bunch of like stealing people's souls, and there are Egyptian things, and there are cards.
Send him to the Shadow Realm. Oh boy, yeah, no, that's a whole other crazy topic. Yeah, sweet. Anything else to say about that, Nathan?
No, but yeah, it really could be any type of game though. Like it could be a card game, it could be a FPS, it could be tower defense. Like there's so much, like it could be. But yeah, but I guess it's not really asking about function.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, you want to close out your segment?
Sure. Thanks for watching this segment of the Mixed Media Podcast. It's a little bit shorter, but that's so you can, if you're watching live, you can stick around for the next segment, which might be a little bit longer, where Irving talks about Oppenheimer. He'll expose Oppenheimer for what it is. I don't know what it is, so I will find. We just had my live reaction to Reddit takes. Now I'll have my live reaction to Oppenheimer takes. So
yes, I know nothing about. Well, I mean, I know some stuff of the advertising of the film, but I have not seen the film, so.
Right. Actually, honestly, I don't even know if I've seen a trailer for it. To be honest, I just know it exists. Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you're not watching live, make sure to check out mixedmediapodcast.com, where you can find any platform you want to, where we're on, and you can see the Oppenheimer segment when that comes out. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Yeah, and now is Oppenheimer. So strap in. It's going to be a dark topic because it is a dark topic. So that's just a warning if you are sensitive to said dark topics. I'll also give a warning before I do anything that describes anything in graphic detail or show anything that's graphic. I'll give a warning beforehand. So there we go. So let's transition here. Here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
I fumbled that. Here we go.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
That suggestion was crazy, the suggested video. But but that is the real Robert Oppenheimer. If you haven't seen that quote before or heard that quote before, it's a very famous quote of his. Were you going to say something, Ben?
I'm going to say, since I can't hear it, what is he saying?
So he's quoting from the Bhagavad Gita, which is Hindu scripture, and he quotes this line from Vishnu that says, "I have become death, destroyer of worlds," right? And he's basically saying that's how he felt when he heard news of the bomb dropping. He was describing the room as well, saying, a few people laughed, a few people cried, a few people were silent. It's a very famous quote of him sort of relaying what the room was like when the news of the bombs dropping occurred. And it's one that...
Quote from Linkin Park.
Oh yeah, yeah, it is actually in the Linkin Park song. Yeah, you're right. It's a quote that is extremely famous, and obviously he looks quite haunted while he's saying it, so it's a pretty intense quote. But I just want to open this up, and we'll introduce ourselves again in a moment for those of you tuning in, audio only, or just tuning into the podcast. I wanted to play that first because the first thing I want to say was that quote first appears in this film while Oppenheimer is having sex with his lover. This is the most powerful, memorable moment of Oppenheimer's public life to most people. And the first time this line appears is while he's having sex with the woman he's having an affair with. She pulls out a book that's written in Sanskrit and says, "Show me your brain, show me your prowess," and translate this on the spot if you really understand Sanskrit. It's just a test of knowledge. That is the first time in the film we hear that quote. The second time is not when this quote was actually said. I wanted to put that out there because I thought that was quite shocking. But before we continue to dive into this topic, we should reintroduce ourselves. So this is Mixed Media. As 99 Crime says, I am Pika Monday, the mixer of medias. Little black humor. This is Mixed Media. We talk about all things art, basically. And my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, and I will be heading the topic for this section.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Okay, so a few things up front, sort of maybe not disclaimers, but a few notes about myself and a few notes about the experience of watching this film. I watched it twice. One as a Barbenheimer. It's funny, slip of tongue. Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer double header that I punished myself through on Sunday, and I then went ahead and watched it again today just to take literally let me see how many notes I've got here. I took notes through the entire 3-hour experience. This much notes on a legal pad is what I took. So I took notes. I notated the entire movie, basically. And maybe if you guys enjoy this analysis, I'll do a full analysis of the film at some point on our locals. Just let us know if that's something you're interested in. But obviously we don't have time to dissect the movie from front to back. 3-hour film, nonetheless, on the show. But the other thing I want to say is that this film... I saw this film because I like following Nolan. I used to call myself a Nolan fan, but his last few films have been kind of not that great to me. So, kind of, I feel like he's fallen off and all this kind of stuff. And I've been begging on the show, if you've seen the show, in the past, I've been begging Nolan to make smaller films, right? So I'm like, please take the scale down, take the ideas down. I miss the Nolan that was able to actually have good characters, actually tell a story without an hour of exposition, actually, do something interesting with cinema without being over bloated, right? So recent Nolan has been super over bloated, and I kind of attribute that to, the success that he's had over time and the creative license that he's gained himself, which is kind of a double-edged sword, right? If no one can tell you no anymore, you can kind of do whatever the heck you want, which can be good or bad. And I think a lot of that has been bad for him lately. So that's being said, Nolan's the filmmaker that got me into film. Dark Knight got me into film, hands down, right? Dark Knight the film. And so he has a special spot in my cinema watch list, so I watch every Nolan feature to come out, regardless. So Oppenheimer, I did the same thing. I don't look up anything about a film if I know for a fact I'm going to watch it. Oppenheimer I knew was one that I was for a fact going to watch, so I just ended up foregoing any synopses, any media. I think I only saw like a 10-second teaser, like of a few shots from the film, and I was like, that's enough. I'm good. I hope this is a character drama. I'm gonna go in blind, right? And that's exactly what I did. On the other hand, I should also let you know, as I talk about the intricacies of what I think is the propaganda of this film, sad to say, is that I should say, I'm saying this so that you know this, so you don't feel like I'm leaving this behind, or I'm not telling you this aspect of my own thoughts. I am not a pro-bomb person. I do not think that the bomb drops on Nagasaki and Hiroshima are remotely moral. And I'm not going to... I could take the analysis of the entire movie from that angle and just kind of undress it from there and move on. But I'm not going to do that. It's not about whether you agree or not with the bomb being dropped. I mean, of course it is about that, and we'll be discussing that. But I mean, it's not like you can... If you agree with it, it's all of a sudden not propaganda. Does that make sense? Like, like just because you agree with it doesn't mean it's not propaganda. There are things that I agree with that have been propagandized, and I think we can all agree with that. And the way in which this film, and which is a great film, by the way, I thought it was really good front to back. From a filmmaking perspective, it was the Nolan that I wanted back, which is why I have such complex emotions about this film, because it was pretty much everything I'd ever asked for him to start doing again. It was a character drama that was done like a thriller. The editing was super sharp. There are some great storytelling devices sprinkled here and there. His non-linear sort of desire to tell stories non-linearly was done in an artistic manner, but didn't get in the way. And the movie being 3 hours wasn't actually a slog, except for the last act. If I was doing a technical breakdown of the film, I would probably talk about that more. But I really want to talk mostly about the propaganda contained within, and how brilliantly, and that is what makes it scary, how brilliantly it's interwoven, how subtly it's interwoven. The reason I'm hyper aware of this kind of filmmaking is because this is not the first time this has happened in cinema. It's not the last time. It's happened a lot in cinema, particularly during the Cold War. And if you want to learn about that, you can check out a few episodes I've done about Cold War era propaganda filmmaking. You can check out I think the episode's called what did Alfred Hitchcock know about the CIA? If you want to check that one out about Alfred Hitchcock. And there's some other stuff about art that occurred in the Cold War era. If you want to check that out, definitely, go to the channel, go check those out. There's KGB versus CIA. There's all kinds of crazy stuff on the channel about this exact stuff. So I went into the film not expecting it to be something like this, because Nolan hasn't made anything like that, to date. And when I got to the theater, started drinking the movie, I was like, this kind of feels like it has overtones of the stuff that you might see in those films. So if you didn't know it, Alfred Hitchcock, great filmmaker, produced a lot of subtle propaganda in his films. One of the examples of which was maybe not Alfred Hitchcock specifically for this particular example, but one of the examples of the subtlety of Cold War era propaganda in film, just one example, is that the Soviets were saying to the United States, or the Soviet propaganda that they were distributing to their own people, to other countries, to sort of slander the United States, and not necessarily falsely, was that we were inherently racist country, right? So they would produce these documentary about the treatment of the blacks at the time, about segregation, about the South, about Bull Connor. They would do literally everything, and they would spread these documentaries everywhere to convince everybody that the United States is evil and that the Soviet way is good, right? The response to that, the subtle propagandized response to that impulse, was that the United States would produce films that had black actors in places that they wouldn't actually be found in the time. So they were anachronistic, right? So they would purposely put, there's record of this is not my opinion watching these films, this is admitted, you know, this is all historical record. They would put black people in places in which they would not normally be found because they usually weren't allowed there to counter the propaganda of the Soviet Union. And sometimes that was the only propaganda in the film. You get what I mean? Like, the rest of the film is a normal film, but the US government wanted to provide money to a certain filmmaker just for the purpose of getting that specific thing in. That's subtle propaganda, right? That's not something you would look at this and be like, this is a this is a pro-US blah blah blah. You'd be like, oh, look at those black people at a tennis match that, you know, would normally not allow them to go to it, you know? Like that kind of thing. So that's to say that the propaganda can be very subtle, very, very subtle. And in this film, I think it's some of the subtlest, most complex, most interesting from the intellectual perspective propaganda I have ever seen. So that's what we're going to be breaking down in this film. Okay. The last thing I want to say about propaganda in general is that we've talked about Empire in the past on the show, not too long ago, actually. We talked about, what was the topic we were talking about Empire? Oh yeah, I was talking about why Hollywood films suck these days from a very high level. We went all the way from the ideas of modern monetary theory, inflation, to Empire, all the way down. Go check it out, it's a great episode. But one thing that I talked about a lot in there was Empire. And one thing you have to understand about Empire is that it's not necessarily attached to the founding of the nation that it is, right? So, like, for example, with the United States, the idea of the empire of the United States, the global empire of the United States, is not necessarily attached to the founding of this country. In fact, in this particular instance of the United States, it's very anti that, right? So it does not revel in its own history from that perspective. Instead, it looks at itself from a lens from its creation. And one thing that I think is very obvious throughout this entire film is that the bomb in this particular film is the birth of the power of the American empire. And it has that feel to it throughout the entire film.
We're going too long. Yeah. 99 Crime said they ended debt peonage in the USA so Japan couldn't use it as propaganda during the war.
Yeah. So little subtle stuff like that, right? Like propaganda can be quite subtle. Okay. So it's the bomb is almost like the birth of the power of the empire. It's the beginning of the empire. It's almost as if the prior United States doesn't matter or doesn't exist, right? So that's what we'll be getting into. And there's some of you out there who have seen Oppenheimer, and I would love for you to chime in as we go through this little dissection, and give me your thoughts, pro, con, whatever I'm saying, or whatever other interesting thoughts that you have. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is that just because something is acknowledged in the film doesn't mean that the film is promoting that message. Just because it's acknowledged in the film doesn't mean it's promoting that message. So, for example, the film will basically regurgitate all the arguments against the state, you know, the United States at the time, against the state, but will never respond to them or explore them. So we'll give lip service to them. Like, you'll have a character be the representative of this point of view. They'll just say it. But then, instead of a response, we'll get a one-liner or some symbolic cut that is supposed to be emotional rather than intellectually engaging. Does that make sense? That's how you subtly, not address the actual core issues in a film like this. So, there you go. Okay, that being said, we're going to cover a few topics, and we might forego the last one or two of these topics depending on how time progresses. I tried to order them in importance and in a logical way. But the first topic we'll be covering is conflating ideology and identity with politics. And this is going to be, that section is going to be a good overview of the history and why it's important to understand the history to be able to dissect the film properly. The second will be the propagandized persecution of Oppenheimer. So this is a political thriller, and there's a lot made about his persecution, but there's a lot also made about certain subtle things about his persecution that are highly propagandized. 3 is the ethics of the bomb, and again, I'm not going to try to make an argument like from my own perspective in that section. I just want to talk about how the film argues this point, whether it's genuinely arguing or it's telling, right? And then we'll move on to scientism and the fake quantum narrative. And this is one of the most subtle aspects of the film's propaganda. I happen to know a lot about quantum mechanics. I've actually read some of the primary sources that are referenced in this film, which is like the happenstance of that is kind of crazy, there's Einstein's actually in the film. There's a whole bunch of people in the film. I've read a lot of the primary sources that that are referenced in this film about the philosophy of quantum mechanics, and the philosophy is used in a very subtle, propagandized way. And the last thing is careerism and the location of family in the hierarchy of goods, right? So where does this film think family belongs in the hierarchy of good? So that's a little roadmap of how I'm going to be going about this. Okay. So let's start with conflating ideology, identity with the politique. So, and you're going to have to bear with me, I can't cite sources for everything I say here. It's kind of like the last long episode I did. Use it as a jumping point. Go read yourself. It's not the kind of thing where I want you to just religiously listen to what I say and not read a book. There's plenty of books to read. Go read books. Go watch documentaries. Go look up things. Focus on primary sources is the thing I would say the most. But one of the things the film relies on is your textbook understanding of World War II and the ensuing Cold War. It relies on the shallow, sometimes extremely inaccurate, depending on, people have different textbooks, different, things they're taught in different schools or whatever, it depends. But when you learn World War II and the Cold War in school, you are not getting the whole picture. And it's literally not possible to give you the whole picture of World War II and the Cold War in 2 years of high school. That makes no sense at all. It's not literally possible to do that. It's a very vast topic, obviously. But it relies on your sort of Cliff Notes understanding of these events. Which is the first time when I realized this while watching the film, I realized that that can't be accidental. You know what I mean? It's one thing, it's not like Nolan and company didn't do their research because it's a highly intelligent film. But the person it's speaking to in the audience is a person who only knows the Cliff Notes. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like they know everything themselves, but they're using your Cliff Notes understanding of the topic to build their arguments on top of, instead of their own more nuanced understanding of the topic, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's start with the first thing. And this is one of the biggest things. If you haven't heard this before and this is new to you, I'm sorry to tell you this. I'm sorry to break the news. But right versus left, when it comes to ideologies of the time, does not make sense. It is fake propaganda of the time that has perpetuated itself to 2023. It still exists. We call Nazism, we put that on sort of the right end of the spectrum, and then we take communism and we put it sort of towards the left end of the spectrum. Did I correctly reverse my direction for the camera? Wow,
that was correct, right? Yes.
Wow, that was impressive. Okay. So we use that terminology, and that terminology, and we have historical information to confirm this, was created by the United States to properly differentiate between the Soviet Union and Germany when it wanted to enter Europe when we entered the war. It was a device to put Soviet communism as far away from Nazi fascism as possible, so that we could convince our particular populace that when we were allying with the communists, that we weren't allying with similar people to the fascists in Germany. Does that make sense? That's the device that was used. Left versus right in this sense is practically meaningless. Meaningless. Yeah.
Okay. Look, Stephanie Costello said, "What happened to the live chat on YouTube? The chat is gone since the live chat has moved." I also had a similar thing where, like, 99 Crimes last chat didn't actually show up for me. So I don't know.
That's not a me
Maybe
thing.
just refresh the page. Refresh the page might.
Did it fix it for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you lose the message history, but new messages appear, it seems. So.
Yeah, by the way, I see some people filtering in on Rumble. Shout out to you, Rumble people. I have the chat open, so if you chat on there, even though you're not connected to Restream and won't show up on the actual screen, I will be able to respond to you because I will be paying attention, so your voices aren't silent. Stephanie Costello also says, or when new segments started, did the chat restart? I don't think so. I didn't do anything that would make that happen. So, yeah, try refreshing the page. Okay, so when we talk right versus left today, it's all politics. There's not really a, like, in the United States, that terminology has solidified to a really fervent extreme, to the point where we're happy to use that sort of spectrum to paint our political opponents in whatever way we particularly want. We put the word far in front of it, or like whatever, like, you know, stuff we want to put in front of it to make our political arguments, to, I don't know, put that opponent as far away from you, right, to differentiate as far away from you as possible. Notice never do you find any sort of concrete definitions for these things, right? Like, where's the boundary, or like blah, blah, blah. That device comes from World War II. So it comes from the usefulness that the administration found in putting, as far as possible, Soviet communism from Nazi fascism. Why is that important? It's very important because that's the same delineation the film makes in its own sort of messaging, which, if you are a student of history, wouldn't make much sense, right? It wouldn't make much sense to make this distinction so hardcore, as if those people are all the way over there and these people are all the way over here. It's a very textbook understanding of World War II. Okay. Now let's define fascism in the way that it's typically defined. Fascism today has basically no meaning. I mean, people call each other fascists for, like, literally anything. It's, again, a useful tool to smear whoever you're desiring to smear. But fascism typically is thought of as an economic model when we're talking academically. So fascism is the idea that the state should create a demand economy or something like that. So, or the state should be controlling the economy to the point where it's centralized, right? So the economy at its core is centralized, and this creates a sort of government-private sector duopoly, or, you know, complex, whatever word you want to use for that. It's a formal, meaning, you know, there's you know, stuff done to make this happen. A formal combining of the private sector and government, so that the government and private sector are co-running the economy. Does that make sense? That is typically what we think of fascism. What usually goes with this, in fact, every time in history does it go with this, is dictatorship. But it's not essential to the economic system. Does that make sense? Like dictatorship is useful to that economic system, obviously, because if you're going to centralize everything, well, centralizing power is also useful. If that's what you think is a good thing, then you're going to say, well, we should just give one dude who we all really like all the power to do all the economic demanding, right? That's typically what occurs. So typically you'll see dictatorship thrown in there with fascism. Communism, again, classically economically defined, is one in which all the means of production are centrally planned, and some definitions add with no currency, right? So like there's no, it's essentially planned to the point where trade doesn't exist, to the point where there's no currency. Does that make sense? It's a alleviation of the right of property of all people there, and property is viewed as the property of the people per se, right? Well, who represents the people? The government. So functionally, you could say property becomes property of the government, right? You could functionally say that. Marxism is a particular flavor of communism that is very particular, and it's very easy to get carried away and paint all communism as Marxism when we're talking about the different flavors that appear. And this is very important when it comes to this film as well. Not all communism is Marxism. What you'll notice with those two definitions is they're actually not that far apart from each other, are they? Right? Like what is the commonality? They have actually one huge commonality, gigantic commonality. Actually, I forgot to say something. Communism, also, while it's not required for communism to occur, communism typically, it's not required for the system's definition, I should say. Typically, in fact, every example we have of it, pretty much, requires a dictatorship. And why would a dictatorship occur under communism? Well, again, when you centralize everything, you want to also centralize power, right? So you want to centralize the ability to control everything, just like fascism. Here's the kicker. The commonality between the two is just centralization of economy, right? There's a difference in flavor on many levels, but like communism doesn't believe that a private sector should exist, right? That's a pretty big difference. Whereas fascism believes that the private sector should exist for itself, and maybe you say functionally those things are actually pretty close to each other, and you wouldn't be terribly wrong. But they like centralization of economy. What also likes centralization of economy, and again, don't get mad at me, these are what these words have meant for a long time, and it especially meant it at the time of World War II and post-World War II. I know today we use all these words completely differently, but we really want to get into the mindset of World War II and not use our current, fuzzy, understanding of these terms. The commonality between these two things, the intersection of them, we typically, at the era especially, called socialism. Again, socialism today is rather argued about term and means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and we're not going to argue that today. But socialism is what the Nazis called themselves. They did not call themselves fascists. That's not a term they applied to themselves. In fact, if you didn't know this, again, a kicker, is Nazi is short in German for National Sozialists, blah, 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 something. I'm not going to pronounce it properly. But in the word Nazi is literally the word socialism, right? So it's like National Socialist Party or something like that is what Nazi, the Nazi Party is officially called. So, is there a spectrum where these two things are highly far apart from each other? Not really. Not functionally. And this becomes... Oh, go ahead, Ben, if you're going to say something. Oh, sorry. And this becomes especially problematic when we talk about the Spanish Civil War, which is referenced a lot in this film, and they never explain to you the conflict. Actually, Nathan, do you know? I know you played Hearts of Iron, and I think Spanish Civil War is like kind of like a big part of that, right?
Happens every single time, basically. I mean, to be fair, the game doesn't explain much either, right? When wars happen, it gives you like one newsletter, but the newsletters don't typically like explain. It's just like, hey, people are kind of upset at each other. They're going to war. You know, it's never like, here's why. All I know is that in the game, Republican Spain is this Republican Spain and Nationalist Spain are the two, what do they call the two like factions of war. One of them is communist. One of them is either fascist or democratic. I can't remember what it is.
It's fascist.
Although it's fascist, okay. It's fascist. Yeah, I remember. That's yeah. That's all I know from the game. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually the Spanish Civil War had tons of factions. Tons of ideological factions that coalesced into two warring factions, if you get what I mean. Because there was a lot of sort of like partnerships created. I'm not a Spanish Civil War expert, but I know enough to know that this film makes a dichotomy in a way that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, you know, the film literally is trying to say that the reason why the two sides in the Spanish Civil War are warring each other are simply because their ideologies are far apart. So it's saying that the fascist side of the Spanish Civil War is so ideologically spread apart from the communist side of the Spanish Civil War that's why the war occurs. Go to the Wikipedia page. The war is very complicated. You can't just peg it on, like, you can't just say, like, that's the reason it happened and just distill it into that, because those two factions didn't exist until violence had already broken out. You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense to, like, you know, to just sum it up like that. And some of the, like, mini factions inside these two factions are themselves actually rather close to each other, but on opposing sides of the war. The important thing to understand here is that all of Europe in this time, not all of Europe, maybe that's an exaggeration, much of Europe has both a communist and a fascist style party. Some of these parties literally call themselves fascist, some of them don't. But you could probably apply the definition fascist to them if you wanted. Meaning, even in Germany, obviously, if you know German history at all, you know, there were actually three parties at the time of the rise of Hitler. There were the Nazis, which was the actual smallest party when Hitler was you know, coming up, which were the fascists. There were the Communist Party, and then there was the I can't remember what you called the last one because they went extinct after the war or during the war. I'm drawing a blank on it, but you had three parties. And the Communist Party and the Fascist Party were really popular by the time Hitler comes around. In fact, if you don't know anything about the rise of Hitler, it is extremely important history. I cannot emphasize enough how important the history of the rise of Hitler is. If you do not understand it, literally, like the next educational thing you need to do is figure out how Hitler took power. Step by step. No one paragraph summary. You need to actually know how. And go do that work, please, because it's very, very important that you do that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the way Hitler was able to consolidate all the power was with a backdoor deal with the Communist Party. They hated each other. They actually killed each other in certain circumstances. The Communist Party and the Fascist Party. Is that totally because they're on opposite sides of a spectrum? Absolutely not. It's not because it's because of politics. That's why I named this section the conflation of ideology and politics. You can be ideologically close to people and still hate them. Does that make sense?
Wait, so how does the movie paint, like, how does the movie relate to this? How do they paint the picture, I guess?
I'll get there, but I want to say one more historical context thing. The last historical context thing that we don't remember in American history is that Hitler was a very popular person internationally. In the United States, there were tons. When I say tons, I mean a lot of people were pro-Hitler. Why does this happen?
Was this the podcast where I learned that Ford was like chilling with them, or was that did I learn this elsewhere?
I think I told you that offline.
Oh, okay.
But there were a lot of people who vibed with the Nazi movement when the Nazi movement was coming up. Why? One of the reasons why is because Hitler's speeches were broadcasted on American radio. So a lot of people were exposed to Hitler's speeches without being Germans proper, and they vibed with the things he had to say, simply speaking. They vibed with it, for whatever reason, right? And they became Hitler fans before the war. And there's a lot of that in U.S. government. In U.S. government, there's a lot of pro-Nazism. And that's important as well for understanding this film's problems. One great example of that is Gerald Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, right? So, Ford cars. He was so pro-Hitler.
Wait, isn't Gerald Ford the president? Isn't it Henry Ford?
Sorry, Henry Ford.
The wrong one?
My bad.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, did I... Yeah,
is that right?
One of us is
Henry
correct.
Ford's I don't know. Yeah, one of them. Yeah, the not president one.
Not the president. Yeah, the founder of Ford Motor Company. 99 Crime says there were actual riots in Newark, New Jersey during the 1930s because the Jewish population was not cool with all the Nazi activity. Absolutely, completely forgotten history of the United States. Completely forgotten. And there's something called, I can't remember the name of this manifesto. But the Soviets created a, this is in the Cold War, they created a fake Jewish manifesto, completely fabricated by the Soviets, that proposed the takeover of the world by Jews, right? So, again, this is fake. The Soviets created that. That's well documented. And they disseminated it because they wanted the rest of the world to become more anti-Semitic. Why? Because they had a high Jewish population that they were trying to keep in the country. That's why they did that. Gerald Ford bought into it. Not Gerald Ford, Henry Ford. Sorry. Henry Ford bought into it.
this poor man.
I mean, they're related, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're related?
I'm pretty sure they're related. Am I wrong about that?
What? Wait, look this up.
Henry Ford puts a pamphlet of this discredited document. And when I say discredited, I don't mean because the official people said it was bad or whatever. I mean, if you wanted to read the arguments about it, the arguments already existed about the document out in the public. You could just go read them. He put this document in the glove compartment of every Ford car, every Model T that came off the press. He put one of these pamphlets in there. And people read them. You can go look that up as well. Very important to understand that our history in the government as well had a very pro-Nazi lean before World War II, asterisk. Because it never really leaves. And we'll come back to it.
It does not seem like Henry and Gerald are related.
Okay. I thought they were for some reason, but I guess they're not. Let's see here. Okay. So why is this important with this particular film? Excuse me. It's because this film ignores the Nazism that was so rampant in the U.S. government that we would save Nazis from the chopping block to integrate them into our administrative state for the purposes of furthering our own fascist goals. If you want to look this up as well, there's a fascist coup plot to take over the U.S. government. It's a fascinating story. You should go look it up. It relates to a man named Smedley Butler, who is one of the greatest American figures in history. Look up Smedley Butler and look up the fascist
Sounds
plot.
like a guy straight out of a cartoon, but yeah.
Yeah, and he's kind of like that, real. He's like a dude. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But like Smedley Butler is a very important person. Look him up. Look up the fascist plot to take over the United States. This film has nothing to say about these things. Instead, we get a perspective of why we need to make the bomb that is distinctly anti-German. Meaning, the reason why we're supposed to care about creating the bomb and the whole process, the reason we're supposed to vibe with Oppenheimer and his buddies, is because they're Jewish, and the Germans are Nazis. Does that make sense? That's the emotional core of the first part of the movie. It's referenced in a few lines. One of them is, it's not your people they're hurting, right? So referencing the fact that Oppenheimer is Jewish and that he cares more about the government officials about bombing Germany, right? The film makes you feel that the real history, the real history here, is one where the dichotomy is pro-Nazi or anti-Nazi. And that is absolutely false. Absolutely false. Okay. The other really funny comment, given what we've talked about already, is they say, quote, they find the sign, the social. This is Oppenheimer talking to a communist, actual communist.
Oppenheimer or Oppenheimer?
I don't know. I'm going to call him Oppie, actually, from now on, because they call him that in the film.
What?
Yeah. I'm going to call him Oppie, because it's much shorter. Oppie, excuse me. Oppie, which, by the way, I don't know if that was a real pet name of his, but if it's not a real pet name of his, it's a great way to create sympathy, is create a pet name. But anyway, Oppie says to a communist, he's literally at a communist party, like not the Communist Party, but he's at a party full of communists, right? And he's talking to this one communist dude, and the communist dude is talking about the Spanish Civil War, and then talking about how the sorry, lost my train of thought. And is then talking about how how he needs to convince Oppenheimer or Oppie that he needs to give more money and to formally join the communist movement against the fascists in the Spanish Civil War. And he asks Oppenheimer, why does the US government not support the anti-communists, right? Or the anti-fascists? Why didn't they support the communists, right? Why doesn't the US government just go ahead and do that? He responds with this ridiculous line. He says, quote, they find the socialists to be more of a threat than the Nazis. Does that, if you read that sentence out again and you replace Nazi with its with its full meaning, it's such a nonsensical line. It says they find the socialists to be more of a threat than the socialists, is basically what he said. But why does that happen in the film? Why does that occur? It occurs because we're trying to paint the socialist communist movement as essentially only functioning as a proxy for being anti-fascist, and thus cleansing the movement. Does that make sense? We're just going over the communist movement, and we're just going to cleanse it with this ideological divide, and that's how we're going to look at it from here on out. The last thing I thought was really funny on this section is that the Santa Fe paper he's given when Germany invades Poland, right? That's the first, act of aggression Germany does, is it invades Poland, if you didn't know that. But he gives him a Santa Fe, I think it's like the Santa Fe Times or like something like this. I didn't get to jot it down quick enough. But he gives him that paper. A really famous front line, which is actually contained in this fantastic book, you should go get it, The Grey Lady Winked, is that the New York Times ran the headline, Poland invades Germany. The day of the invasion. And you might ask yourself, was that just a typo? No, absolutely not. It wasn't a typo. The author of that article, I can't remember his name, was an ardent pro-Nazi fascist, right? And he was a writer at the New York Times, and he was in the pocket of the fascists over there. So the fascist said, can you run the opposite headline just so we have some misdirection so we can delay any responses? He said, yeah, sure. New York Times printed it. New York Times just printed it, and there you go. Now we got that. But you have to understand that that's how deep the pro-fascist movement is in the United States. It's that deep. That's how far it goes. Okay. And we'll tie that back together at the end. The second thing that this film wants to sort of do here is present Oppenheimer as the casualty of political persecution of bureaucrats. And here I will submit to you that my thesis for the propaganda contained herein is that the purpose of this aspect of the film is to put the administrative state, the executive branch, right, of the government. Our government has 3 branches: executive, legislative, judicial, right, from elementary school. This film wants to put the executive branch above the legislative branch. It's trying to make an argument for executive control. I think we're starting to see a pattern here with the prior section, right? We're having an issue with advancing a lot of the same sort of fascist-esque ideas, this entire film. But it basically wants to cast the legislators as mere stupid politicians. And I don't have a good opinion of politicians, by the way. I'm not trying to I'm not a fan of politicians by any means. But from a governmental theory perspective, those people represent me, whereas the random administrative person does not. Oppenheimer was not voted into the power that he got, right? By the way, I should say this as well. Just because this film presents Oppie in this way doesn't mean Oppie as a person is... This is not me critiquing Oppie as a person. This is me critiquing the way the film is using Oppie's character, Oppie's history, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So, the film itself is self-contradictory the entire time about why we should care that Oppie is being persecuted. And one of the devices it uses to further this is not telling you the ultimate persecution that will occur. It just gives you vibes that the legislative branch, or other elected people like the president, or the president's cabinet by extension, right? At least closer extension. That those people who are representatives, that those people are after this guy who just found himself with this big burden to bear. Does that make sense? Like, this guy found himself with this big burden to bear, and we get this vibe throughout the film that the problem here is the people who are elected. The issue with this is that the film itself gives you the argument for why Oppenheimer, or Oppie, should have scrutiny, and when it ultimately tells you what happens to him, what the ultimate persecution is, it is so nonsense while we put so much emotional backing behind it. And I understand now, after looking into the Oppenheimer sort of public discourse, that this is an angle that that many people have been taking in history about Oppie, is that he was a product of partisan, that his career ended because of partisanship or just politicking or whatever. Where the film gives you the argument itself for why, ultimately what happens to him, is he just loses clearance. He loses security clearance, thus losing his job, right? Like, you can't work on nuclear stuff if you don't have security clearance. This guy, at this point in the film, is famous. He's accomplished the difficult task of making the bomb. He's got a team full of people who respect him. And he's got a platform. And the ultimate persecution is he loses clearance. Is this supposed to be the great persecution of Oppie, this entire film, this political thriller that we've been given? So what is it that it's trying to do? Well, it's trying to do a lot of subtle things. The film does a lot of very subtle intellectual things when it comes to communism. By sort of pairing Oppie with all these kinds of communist imagery. So, like, one of them is Picasso. We've talked about Picasso on the show, actually, and something about, I can't remember the title of the episode, is like the CIA and art or something like this. Or we talked about Jackson Pollock. We talked about about Picasso, and he talked about the war for modern art, quote unquote, right? And how the CIA created American modern art to dominate culturally in the entire world as a means of hegemony, and that the Soviets tried to counter it with traditional art, except when it came to visual art, it felt like it had no answer to the popularity of Jackson Pollock, so flocked to the arms of Picasso, famous artist, obviously, who was a communist, a Soviet supporter, actually, specifically, who they flocked to him as the example of an artist who was better than the Jackson Pollocks of the world. And by the way, they're not wrong. Jackson Pollock is not a better artist than Picasso. Prove me wrong. But the point I'm trying to make is that there was a propaganda war when it came to art. So what we get to see here is that the film shows Oppenheimer going to see Picasso's, and it does this very subtly. And the way it's doing that sneaky film, it's using Picasso as a representation of his fractured nature. That's the film language it's trying to do. Because Picassos look like that, right? Like if you look at a Picasso face, fractured, all that kind of stuff. And they're trying to make that imagery connect. Like, he's just going to these communist things because he's really into how they vibe with him personally. That's the argument we're supposed to accept, right? And it's not going to just Picasso because he happens to also be a communist, right? He's going to these communist paintings because, fractured nature, obviously, that you can vibe with these paintings. This will become more absurd as I continue to list the things that Oppie does in this film. He reads communist manifestos. He becomes a Caltech Berkeley professor. And if you don't know the history of communist infiltration in the United States, the Soviet Union was literally buying off professors to promote communism in the universities. If you want to learn more about this, look up Yuri Bezmenov.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Look up his talks. He's a former Soviet intelligence, and look up his lectures on how Soviet infiltration of communism in the United States functions. So he becomes a professor at Caltech, Berkeley. He starts doing political chants in his classroom with the other physicists. Like communist chants, by the way. He attends communist gatherings regularly. In the film, at least, it's like 6 times he goes to like communist, and there's no reason given to it. It's just like he's just kind of exploring, He's just kind of, but he's only exploring the communist party, He then goes to, or he then starts sending money through a slush fund, through a money laundering. He starts money laundering money to the communists in the Spanish Civil War. And don't worry, it's just socialism. It's like, okay. And then he starts getting involved with the domestic Communist Party. But he says over and over in this film, I'm not a party member. Okay. Well, film, logically, if we're just going to be logical people, if your concern, and maybe you disagree that this is a concern, and that's a different topic, I mean, maybe we'll talk about that, but if your concern is that there's communist infiltration from the Soviet Union happening during the Cold War, and this guy, literally everybody he knows is a communist, and he has all the nuclear secrets, how is it not logical to revoke his security clearance? That's all that happens to him. They don't kill him. They don't stalk his family. They do nothing else to him but revoke his clearance. Film. Can we logic together? Let me give you more facts. In the film, and I assume in real life, he has several affairs, or 2 affairs in particular. One affair with a avowed communist woman who he met at a communist party, who was trying to convince him to be a communist the entire film. While he's also like still having relations with her while he's the head of the the Manhattan Project. So he's literally like in a sexual relationship with a communist, and then he ends up marrying a card, literally card. Like when I say literally card carrying, the film literally says she has a card. A literal card carrying Communist Party member. Literal card carriers. He marries her. Literally marries her. And she had 5 husbands. In fact, he steals her from her prior husband. That's the story of how they get married. But she had 5 husbands. Her second husband, the film says, died on the communist side of the Spanish Civil War. Do you see what I mean by, like, how is this film trying to make you feel bad that they revoked his security clearance? How does that make any sense for you to feel bad about that? It's literally logical. It's absolutely logical that his security clearance ought to be revoked. By the way, that does not mean Oppie is a communist, actually. I don't know. I don't know the history of this enough to even conjecture. I'm just saying the film within itself makes the argument for revoking his security clearance. When he's told to stop associating with these people so he can keep his clearance, what does he do? He keeps associating with them. He keeps associating with them. This is crazy. When you join a job, like I have security clearance. I have top secret clearance, which doesn't really mean much. It's a very common clearance. But I still have it, technically. So I have top secret clearance. When I sign the stuff, I know what comes with it. You know what I mean? Like I signed it. I said I would do XYZ things. It means I'm never going to tell you anything about what I worked on that was classified. This guy went to become the head of this project, knowing that the government, he's told several times that they're concerned about his communist fraternizing, and that he should stop it if he wants to stay head of the project. And then he just doesn't do it. Then we're supposed to feel bad about him about it when his clearance is revoked, which is the logical conclusion to that. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. He says at one part in this film, and this is where I think the propaganda really starts to become obvious why it's here. He says, "I'm a New Deal Democrat," to the investigating officer who is about to put him in charge of the Manhattan Project, when he says, "You know a lot of communists." You seem to know a lot of communists. And he goes, "No, I'm just a New Deal Democrat." Okay, maybe that's true. I don't know. His associations are with no New Deal Democrats. but the film is trying for us to think that the spectrum here is that we got this left-right spectrum, going back to that, and that communism is all the way over there on the left, and then we've got New Deal Democrat that's like center-left, right? Like that's what the film is trying to do. These things don't have anything in common. like not necessarily, like not fundamentally ideologically. They're not. Communists aren't like calling themselves New Deal Democrats. That's not a thing. You know what I mean? They're communists. That's what they believe in. It's different system of economy. It's a complete different thing. But what the film is trying to do is the film is trying to use Oppie as a sort of symbol of anti-fascist persecution, or persecution of those who are anti-fascist. You get what I'm saying? Just for their political ideology. That's the core propaganda here. Ironically, the film ends up promoting a lot of the fascist ideas that it apparently abhors. Because, again, we have a conflation of ideology and political party. We have that complete conflation. Being anti-Nazi party does not make you anti-fascist. Does that make sense? So while the U.S. government was happy to kick the Germans' butts till the cows come home, doesn't mean those who stayed in the U.S. government weren't also pro-fascist. There's many examples of this, and we'll get to the worst of that Actually, right now, it's actually the next thing on my list. The worst of it is something called Operation Paperclip. Go look it up. There's a Wikipedia article that very poorly summarizes it, but it still summarizes it to the point where you'll understand the controversy. Operation Paperclip was a U.S. operation to bring Nazis. I think I mentioned this, I referenced this at the beginning of the show, but let me flesh this out real quick. We literally, during the Nuremberg trials, there are certain Nazi doctors, Nazi engineers.
I want to explain what the Nuremberg trials are.
Oh boy, okay. If you don't know what the Nuremberg trials are,
I do. I wasn't sure if that was like common knowledge. You know, I don't know.
Okay. The Nuremberg trials were just the post-war trials of Nazis, and other people accused of war crimes and other crimes against humanity. Right. So there are a bunch of law or a pseudo law that's sort of written around war crimes, all this kind of stuff. And then in Nuremberg, we get these trials of these Nazis who are involved. Lots of people get executed. A lot of people get executed. A lot of Nazis get executed. What's interesting, though, and this is the nuance that we need to start getting over in this country, there are some people who are probably guilty of something, but probably don't need to get their heads chopped off. Some of those people are like people who are like fringely associated with this whole thing. So we have like the chefs of like Nazis being executed, like the chefs of like upper level people getting executed. Maybe they're guilty of something, but like execution should probably be reserved for the people who conducted medical experiments on Jews, famously the twin Jew experiments, where they took Jewish twins and they ran experiments to see how they would react under different very heinous and torturous procedures. Those doctors did not get killed. Specifically that doctor that I just told you about, that did those Jewish twin experiments, who was heading those, he was brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip. And he was, maybe he was just, they asked him okay, what did you learn? We might as well learn from your medical experiments so that we could treat diseases that you figured. No. They employed him and gave him administrative power. A lot, and this is not the only example, multiple people. They literally gave them high positions in the administrative government. And this is where MK Ultra ends up coming from. MK Ultra isn't just some random power trip that a bunch of random Americans had. MK Ultra directly comes from the minds of Nazis. So, if you don't know what MK Ultra is, go look it up. Again, just facts of history. Reagan apologized for it when he was president. So it's acknowledged by the United States that it actually happened. There's literally no controversy in MK Ultra. Go look up the Wikipedia page if you'd like to get again, poor summary of it, but, to get some semblance of an idea of MK Ultra. But these are some of the worst human beings that we brought here to the United States. And this film, these are anti-Jewish, these people are still anti-Semitic. They still write anti-Semitic things. This film is saying that the entire U.S. versus Axis argument is going to be distilled in the anti-fascists versus the fascists, thereby absolutely erasing the known destruction of the administrative state of a lot of lives. A lot of people get tortured and killed. Babies are stolen from hospitals. It's horrific. Absolutely horrific. Tortured. Famously, some House representatives will be drugged under the on the MK Ultra program, trying to literally mind control them. Insanity stuff. That's because we let the psychopath insane people into our government. So, what is this nonsense about communist versus fascism? Beats me in this film. To me, it seems like what we want to do is we want to whitewash all the simultaneous fascism that was happening in our own country, while upholding the communists as the anti-fascists and therefore and using the word socialism as many times as possible to substitute like interchangeably, so that we view the socialists as the anti-fascists. That's what I think the film is trying to do with that. Very subtle stuff. Okay, and I might... 10 o'clock? Yeah, okay. Let's continue to the bomb itself. Now remember that I said the first time that the film references the famous Oppenheimer quote that I played at the beginning here is when he says, that's the whole thing where he says, I am become death, destroyer of worlds, that whole thing. Famous quote. The first time we get that, he's literally having sex with his commie lover person, right? Right. The second time we get it, and we get this whole sequence where we're trying to get the bomb finished, right, in a very entertaining manner. You know, the struggles that come along with it, the physics problems, all this kind of stuff. And the second time we get this quote is not when it happens in history, which is post-bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The second time we get it is after the nuclear test. So they do a nuclear test in the middle of desert Los Alamos, famous town, fake town that was built up by the U.S. government to house all the scientists. And with the second time we get the quote is after the test. After the test, all the scientists are happy. Do you see what the subtle thing that's happening here? Is it becomes a statement of awe. Of reverent awe. Not of haunted moralizing, right? As Oppenheimer was actually doing. Instead, it becomes the awe of what can be done by the administrative state. That's the argument that it's being traded for. Which I find disgusting. And guess where we don't get that quote? We never get it where it's supposed to be. Not even when the actual bomb goes off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We don't bring it back for a third time. We brought it back for the test, but we don't bring it back for the third time for the actual moment that he's actually referring to. We don't get it. So we've degraded the moment by making it a funny, not funny, but like a sort of sexualized thing, and sort of bringing that moment down that way. Then we bring it down again, or like give it a new meaning, basically. We break it down, then give it a new meaning by doing it, by having that quote after the test with reverence, said with reverence, right? Look what can be done by the scientists, by the professional class of the administration. All over the film, we get this symbolism of chain reactions and ripples. It's very good storytelling, very good film. It's very subtle. I noticed it actually fully the second time. The first time I noticed a few of them, and I was like, "Oh, there's actually all over the place." This imagery of a ripple, right? Like like a drop in water, or like it's like literally everywhere. Like chain reactions, like they're all over the place in the film. Because what are we going to do with this imagery, with this symbolism? Are we going to say, wow, that's correlated with the physics involved? You know, if you don't know how a nuclear bomb works, it's a chain reaction, you fire something into fissile material and then it explodes other material and yada yada. It's a chain reaction. Are we going to tie that to that alone? No, absolutely not. We're going to tie it into the moral terror instead. Instead of tying that to just the physics, that symbolism will be used to substitute the moral arguments that the bomb itself is horrific for the post-bomb world being horrific. It's a very subtle flip of the script. The moral terror is going to come from the post-bomb world potentially being self-destructive. The idea that this chain reaction of nuclear warfare, right? Like one person lobs a nuke and then the whole world, lobs nukes and then it's all done. That's the chain reaction we're going to talk about. We're not going to connect it to the actual bomb itself. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, the film takes the position at the beginning that this bomb is being created because the Germans have started on the journey to a bomb first. There's a headline, whatever, about this and all this kind of stuff, and that we have to respond by, as quickly as possible, creating the bomb before they do. If you are not thinking intently while this is happening, you're going to get immersed, which is good. That's what a film is supposed to do. It's a very immersive film, very great film. But me being a filmmaker, I can't watch movies that easily that way. Like it's like an auto analysis always occurs, right? So I'm never like in the same state, or rarely, I should say, in the same state as the rest of the people in the audience, right? It's hard for me to not see the filmmaking behind the film. So where does my mind start going? It starts going into, what history did they think about when they were making the film, blah, 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 all these things. And it helps you to forget that the bomb ends up being dropped on Japan and not Germany. Immersion will let you forget that, you know what I mean? Like, obviously everyone knows that. But immersion is, we're living in the moment with them. Oh, the bomb has to be created before the Germans, before the Germans get the bomb, right? It allows you to forget that the bombs are ultimately dropped on Japan. And then second, it allows you to conflate having the bomb with using the bomb, which are very different ideas, right? So the film...
Yeah, I remember something in history class, right? We do these things every once in a while where we'd be put into a scenario and be like, what would you do if you were like, in charge of like the situation, right? Like the classic one was like the Cuban Missile Crisis or whatever, right? Like, what are your options, whatever. One of them was like having to do with like dropping the bomb or whatever, right? Or like, and like, the class comes to the conclusion like, at first we're like, we would drop it or we wouldn't drop it, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know who said this, was like, what if we just like showed them that it existed, right, and like just detonated it somewhere, right? And everyone's like, that's literally just the better idea. It's like
we'll get there. Hey, this film has things to say about that.
Look at this giant, not unnoticeable explosion. Yeah, basically that. But,
yeah, this film has things to say about that. But yeah, so like when we first introduced the concept of we need to make the bomb, it's that we need to make the bomb before the Germans do, so that the Germans don't use it on us. Which, by the way, requires a leap of logic, right? Because like you have to leap. The logical leap you have to now make is that you having the bomb prevents Germany from using it on you. That could be true, but like there has to be some like more reasoning done in between those two ideas. But we skip it over because we were trying to conflate using the bomb with having the bomb. Does that make sense? So, the journey to make the bomb is one big conflation of using the bomb and having the bomb. And it's very motivating emotionally because these are Jews that we're mostly seeing on screen. All the people he recruits for the project are Jews and also communists, but again, that goes to the last section. He's recruiting a ton of communists from his university to be on the team as well, but they're Jews, and so Jews dropping a bomb on Nazis sounds really nice, or Jews helping to stop the war with the Nazis, that sounds really emotionally compelling, which makes a lot of sense. You have to understand that this is actually a real thing for these actual real Jews of the time. Some of these people actually fled either Nazi-occupied territory or Germany itself, came to the United States, and then worked on the bomb project for that specific reason. That's why they were communists. Again, going back to the complex history of it's because the communists were traditionally against the fascists in Germany. Does that make sense? So if you're a Jew in Germany, your natural party alliance is going to be with the communists. If you don't want the fascists to be in control, you either convince yourself of the arguments for whatever your party's policy is, but your political identity is really just anti-fascist, right? Like that's like where it comes from, right? So, okay, fine. That's where we're going with this. Then the film abruptly passes over the death of Hitler very abruptly. When I say abruptly, it's literally 2 lines. where the Germans are defeated and Hitler has killed himself. It's like, literally, we get that line. The Germans are defeated and Hitler has killed himself. It's like, okay, so where's the emotional force of this film going to come from? What's the argument we're going to make for why we still need to drop the bomb? Well, Oppie's got something to say to these people who are like, well, we don't have to make this anymore, like, because there's some part of his team that is anti-using the bomb, right? We don't have to do this anymore. Yay, it's awesome, bomb project over. Oppie goes, there's still Japan. And the music, the editing, the delivery, everything just forces you to believe it. Does that make sense? It's just by sheer emotional force and weight of that moment that we're just going to continue and go, okay, let's just apply the emotions we had, for the Jews making an anti-fascist bomb. We're just going to continue that same feeling on, but now towards the Japanese. Okay, let's just continue, which I find to be quite facetious. Eventually the bomb is created, and it's tested, and it works, and all this kind of stuff. And Oppie ends up in a room with a bunch of decision makers, military people, who are deciding what they should do with it. Because now we're going to bring up the moral question. This is not 2/3, maybe like a little more than halfway through the film, and we haven't discussed the ethics of the bomb practically ever. You know what I mean? As if none of these people really cared at all about dropping a bomb on a city, which apparently everyone understood was the goal, is what we find out in the scene where he's talking to the military. And we get this verbal jousting between all the people there, who are agreeing, disagreeing about what, or throwing out ideas about what should be done, and some very small brain ethics is going on. Very small brain. Because what ends up happening is the film repeats its pattern of offering an objection that might sound familiar, like, why don't we just show them that the bomb exists by dropping it on an island? There's plenty of those in Japan that are uninhabited. The film literally gives you that option. It's like, why don't we just drop it on an uninhabited island to show them how awesome and big it is? Or even an island that has no inhabitants other than military targets, which there were also plenty of those, in Japan, where there's just an airstrip and, some soldiers, you know what I mean? Keeping watch over the island, Why don't we just drop it on one of those? What's the response? Nothing. Because the response to this is, well, that's preposterous. The effective equivalent of that. Well, no, that's preposterous. Move on. Like, that's the effective argumentation that's going on here. Excuse me. Then we're given the rationale that we need to see the size of the destruction of the bomb so that no bomb ever has to be dropped again. Now, this is just this is madness. This is stupid logic. Like, this is really, really dumb. Not without any further fleshing out, right? Like, maybe you believe that, but that needs a lot more fleshing out than just, we need to demonstrate it on real humans. Because that's the only way, we could convince people that's a real bomb. Well, historically speaking, we only dropped the bomb twice, and those were very specific types of bombs. They were atom bombs. And the film references this new bomb that would be created later that's a lot bigger, called the H-bomb, the hydrogen bomb. And this hydrogen bomb, its blast radius is 20 times larger or something maybe it's even more than that, I don't know. A hydrogen bomb is gigantic, right? The creator of the hydrogen bomb is actually prominently featured in the film Mr. Fermi. If you know from chemistry, Fermi's paradox. Anyway, but the hydrogen bomb, we could have demonstrated. I mean, you could just not believe us that we got the hydrogen bomb first. You know what I mean? Like, we could just drop it on. I don't know. There's a lot of proxy wars going on. We could just drop it on Vietnam. We could just drop it on Korea. You see how this logic is pretty. Why didn't we do that later? You know what I mean? Like why is this the only time we use this logic? You know? The film then goes on to say, well, why don't we just drop it on a large military installation that has a bunch of housing for workers around it, and therefore they're arguably combatants there, you know? Which is, okay. That's much more interesting. You know, factory workers can arguably be combatants, depending on your opinion on such a thing, right? Okay. Great. We're trying to find a moral solution here to not killing innocent women and children. And they just basically go, nah, it's not the same. It's not the same. Nah, not the same. They're just not big enough. You know, it's not, the destruction can't be wide and great enough, you know? And they just go, yeah, we're just going to go on with it. Meanwhile, Oppie is supposed to be having an existential crisis over his bomb being used to drop over a city. And we're given him emotionally reacting to it, but what does he never do? He never actually stands up for the position that he supposedly holds at this point in the film. He never actually goes, yeah, I'll quit if you do that. You know, like, it'd be that simple, right? It'd be that simple. Yeah, I'll just quit, you know, if that's what you want to do with the bomb. But, you know, he's like, I guess I have to do it now. There's a few quotes in here that I find really interesting. One of those quotes is him saying, "It's our job to make it, not to know how, not to. It's our job to make it, not to decide how it's used." This line
that does not garner a lot of sympathy.
I mean, this is some Nazi type logic right here. I'm not gonna lie, but you know, there's a lot of arguments that were happening in Nuremberg, by the way. The same arguments that were being made in the defense of Nazis. They're saying, well, I helped, but I didn't agree. Well, it's basically the same logic that Oppenheimer is deploying for dropping the bomb. I helped, but I didn't agree. You know? It's the same thing. And I find it very stupid to have this internal contradiction going on in this film. Let's see here. Let's see. I think. Oh yeah. So now, fast forward to when the bombs actually dropped on Hiroshima. And how does this happen in the film? There is not a single scene of this film in Japan. Not one scene in Japan. I find that extremely disrespectful, personally. Now, there's not a single scene in Japan. How's the bomb is dropped? What happens? The radio, which might be realistic. You know, that might be. I'm sure that's actually how they found out from Oppenheimer's own description. You know, is that on the radio, Truman got on the radio and announced that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Right? Okay, fine. That's how it happened. But you know what we have as a film? We can take the camera and point it at Japan, you know, for the bomb blast instead of just hearing it over the radio. Because the only thing we get about the bomb's effects, its real effects on people, is Truman's politicized, right? You know, in his speech, he's gonna be like, hurrah, hurrah, you know, we have the most ultimate weapon, it's great, and it's going to defeat the Japanese. He's focusing on it ending the war in his speech. And that's the only taste we get of the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima is Truman's own words. Now, you might say, well, I was really moved by that moment because so many of the characters were just standing there in awe that this was happening. This is the type of thing I'm talking about. It's very subtle. I am telling you right now, if they had used modern film technique to show you the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and its effects on the people who limitedly survived, like, you know, people who didn't get immediately turned into dust, but people who, you know, were just far enough that they died slowly, or varying degrees of slowly, depending on how far out you go, that none of the rest of this film would have worked. It would have felt like nonsense compared to the awe for the bomb Who cares about the bomb when we have death in front of us? See what I mean? Like who the process of creating the bomb, the political drama behind it, and all this kind of stuff. If you saw it, you would not care anymore. You would say, what is this politicking? Who cares about it? What is this like, yeah, okay, you lost your security clearance. Yeah, whatever, man. Like, I mean, look at what you did. Not necessarily, even if you agree that it should have been done, we all have, most of us at least, have an innate care for human beings. You know what I mean? So even if you think, wow, it was necessary for us to do this, I wildly disagree with you, but if that's where you're coming from, it was absolutely necessary for us to achieve this end. If you actually saw it in the violence that it was, politics would feel so small. Communist, whatever the heck, would feel so small. But this is not the point of the film is not about Oppie's post-bomb anti-proliferation or his emotional state post-bomb. It's going to cover that for about 15 minutes in like high intensity, his sort of emotional reaction to the whole thing. But we're going to deftly switch in the last act, the most boring act of the film. The last act, we're going to switch to a political thriller about how one cabinet prospect screwed Oppie over from his security clearance. What does this functionally do to the ethics conversation about the bomb? It makes it so that your opposition to the bomb project becomes an opposition to this Oppie guy that was so burdened with the ethics of it all. Because what does Oppie never do? He never vocalizes his actual intellectual, which he certainly has. He's a very smart guy in real life. I'm sure he had actual, tangible, moral thoughts about what happened, you know what I mean? You know, that he could articulate and they would have logic to them. He never articulates it. All we get are these offensive, to me, scenes where he's symbolically imagining what one of the victims might have gone through in his bomb. Meaning he's talking in front of this crowd and he's being interrupted by these thoughts. And this girl, one example is this girl, and some flashing, whatever, her face kind of, her skin, like a layer of skin looks like it's sheared off. Now, it's not very violent. like when I say that, it looks like paper, it looks like just paper, like waving off in tatters off her skin. And it's not like her face is missing on the other side. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like a layer of skin, is like sort of like rifting off. That's not what happens. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? This film is Nolan's, I think, only rated R film. It's rated R because he decided to put nudity in the film. A lot of it. And for reasons are inexplicable to me. Actually, I really was shocked and why is this even here? It didn't make any filmic sense to me. It didn't add anything. At least add anything from Nolan's perspective even. I can't even imagine why he did that. Make his film purposely rated R like that. The film's rated R. You can have gore. You can have tons of gore. You chose to use your shock value for nudity, but not for the actual carnage and destruction that is the bomb. Which I found to be crazy. He steps on a charcoaled body, which looks like a stupid stuffed prop or whatever, and you can he steps into it, it shatters. But it doesn't even look like human. It's just like a charcoal lump, if you get what I mean. And he steps in it and he's like, ah. That's not the worst of it. At all. Not even close. In fact, later, he actually goes to a showing of the aftermath of the bomb. This is how much this film doesn't want to show you. He goes to a showing with slides, of showing pictures of the aftermath of the bomb. And guess what we don't see? The slides. Guess what we see? His reaction to the slides. As if the film is Yeah, what's important is like, what's important is that he feels bad about it. What does he never vocalize? In what way do you feel bad about it? Like, do you feel bad about it because, like, you think it was morally wrong? Do you feel bad about it because, in the same way someone who does, like, a just act of self-defense feels bad? You know what I mean? Where it's like, I didn't want to kill someone today, but, like, my hands were tied. You know what I mean? It leaves it ambiguous how he feels bad. It's not specific. And it refuses you to make you make that emotional decision yourself by seeing the carnage and seeing how you feel about it. I think that's inexplicable. I think it's completely inexplicable. Okay. And the last thing I'll cover here, I'll cut the rest off. And again, I might do a full breakdown if you guys really want it. Maybe even scene to scene with all the notes I have. I don't know. We'll see. Just let me know. I'll do that on locals. But the last thing I have to say about it is that the quantum narrative, the use of quantum physics is the most complicated and fascinating and terrifying uses of a very niche topic to propagandize the subject. I just thought it was, like, amazing. And I think this is the cherry on top of everything. The film's, another thesis I'll put forth to you, is the film puts the impressiveness and power of science over the necessity of morals, of ethics. So it's more in awe of what's going on than it is morally concerned. It puts scientific theory over moral theory, meaning it's saying, well, science is the definite thing, and the ethics is all the fuzzy stuff. Does that make sense? Maybe that's your opinion, but you got to put it forth like you have an argument for your opinion, and don't just subtly inject it with quantum physics. How is this done? So we have a bunch of famous scientists appearing in this film. We have Oppenheimer himself, obviously. We have Einstein, who plays actually a plot role in this film. Like, he's actually important. He appears a lot. There's Niels Bohr, Fermi, what's his name? Heisenberg, and Gödel. Like I said at the open, I've read a lot of these people's. Like, actually, have I read something from all of them? Maybe except for Fermi. I think I've read literally primary source theoretical physics documents from all of those people, except for Oppenheimer too. I don't think I've read Oppenheimer or Fermi. Right? So I've read everyone else. And I've read specifically their philosophizing on quantum mechanics, because I had to for a class. So I've actually read them. The film's ultimate conclusion about quantum mechanics, and I can't go into detail about what quantum mechanics actually is. That's a gigantic topic for another day. But the film... Yes, I did read. Kai Kairos in the chat says, "Did you read Gödel's incompleteness theorem?" Yes, I did. I absolutely did. It's fantastic work. It took me a long time to wrap my head around the reasoning, but I came around to it. So yeah, excuse me. What we're using quantum as is to represent the reality of paradox. Which is in of itself a paradox, the statement itself. The reality of paradox. Now, one basic tenet of logic that I refuse to indulge in debate about for a variety of reasons. I think it's one of the most self-evident truths of life, is that contradictions cannot be true. It's called the what's it called?
Principle of non-contradiction.
The principle of there you go. PSR. The principle of non-contradiction. PSR is the sufficient reason one. Sorry. Principle of non-contradiction. So the PNC, right? I'm a philosophy, amateur philosopher. I like thinking about these things. I like studying these things and reading these things. That's why I was into quantum mechanics to begin with, because it's very interesting from a philosophical perspective. And all the players in advancing the theory were all very philosophical people. That's what theoretical physicists are, practically philosophers, at least when they're good at it. It's saying that wave-particle duality proves that contradiction can exist, and therefore contradiction can exist. This is so disrespectful to the quantum debate. It's shocking. It's like, bro, come on. Like, that's not even true. Like, none of that makes any sense from a scientific perspective. No one accepts that as a actual core course of reasoning in the core argumentation about quantum mechanics, because why? None of them are willing to get rid of the principle of non-contradiction that binds all of logic together. You know what I mean? That A cannot equal not A is like a core tenet of logic, right? No one believes that. But what is the film using this idea that paradox can be real for? Because it's repeated multiple times. Paradox can be real because the paradox of the bomb, the moral paradox of the bomb, can exist. I can hold that, the film is saying, I can hold that the bomb is bad, but it's also good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's actually using that idea to lure you into a state where you are willing to accept the idea that two opposing things can be true at once. And it's subtly done. Very subtly done. It's very crazy. And there's multiple lines that references Heisenberg. There's a line actually from, I looked it up, it's actually a line from one of his papers, where he talks about the death of causality. If you know anything about Heisenberg's interpretation of quantum mechanics, this is very deceptive. Very deceptive. Almost disgustingly so. When he talks about the death of causality, he's talking about physical causality. Physical causality. One of the most interesting things about quantum mechanics is that there is a path to proving free will in it. It's something that all of these scientists actually thought about. Like, a lot of them thought about it. Gödel being one of the most important figures in that, where he has a different, it's called Gödel's theorem, or Gödel's equation or something, where he basically proves that you'll have to either accept one of two ideas, almost mathematically, which is that either free will exists or science doesn't. It's like the conclusion of Gödel's theorem. And it's actually a very clever theorem, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube that explain it. Very brilliant stuff, very brilliant minds. But when he's quoting the bit about causality doesn't exist, the point the film is trying to make is that quantum allows everything to be fuzzy. We don't need to have black and white anymore. There's another line where it says, the revolution that's happening in quantum physics is a revolution that parallels that of the communist movement. Yeah, that's what we're doing here. That's the kind of film this is going to be. You know, is like, quantum physics is revolutionary, and so is communism, and it's like, communism is quantum. Believe it. You know? That's what we're going to do here. So I thought that part was rather disgusting. So, in short, I'm going to stop this here, but in short, just to sum everything all together, this film is a fantastically crafted film. One of Nolan's best. His best, definitely, since Interstellar. Whether it's better than Interstellar or not, I'm not sure. It actually made me look at Interstellar in a weird way, because I was like, the last point I was going to talk about was career and family, and there's a whole bunch of nastiness on that level. I won't get into it now. But basically, sacrifice everything for the state is the short of it. The state, you owe everything to the state. Your family, your wife, your everything is for the state. But you know, this film definitely was surprising to me. Nolan hasn't produced anything, even Dunkirk, which, you know, might be like propaganda fodder. I'm not British, so I don't really know. whether it is or is not definitively or not. But, Dunkirk comes off as a patriotic film, simply speaking. Not every film about a war is going to contain propaganda. I don't believe that, never have. But I just didn't expect this kind of thing to come from him. So when I started noticing these things, it was organic. It's just me sitting there, knowing my history and being like, why are you doing this? Why are you conflating these two obviously non-conflatable ideas? Why are you presenting history other than it was? Why are you ignoring some of the most heinous things that's ever happened in humanity? Why don't you show the bomb? You made such a big deal about practically making the test bomb, right, in the film is a practical effect. It's a massive explosive that they did. And they made a huge deal about this aspect of the film. But you couldn't use your filmmaking prowess to actually show what happened to the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That, to me, is insane. And so, yeah, makes me really sad. I was going to show a film from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I decided I actually selected one that was a little less gory than, there's some really gory stuff out there. Real footage from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's what I'm saying. Like, people can know these things because it's out there. We know what it looked like. You could emulate some of this famous footage. You didn't. But I'm not going to show it because maybe it's just a bit much after all of that. So I'm just going to put a link to the one that I was going to show in the comments. It's actually one of the lesser graphic ones. It contains a little voiceover that I just ignore the voiceover. Look at the images if you want. And there's also some famous documentaries that you can look up from Japanese filmmakers who have their own voice and whose voice is not represented in this film. You can go check out those documentaries. One of them is called White Light, Black Rain, a very famous documentary. I think I watched pieces of it actually in high school. And there's another Japanese film called Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or Hiroshima-Nagasaki or something like that, if you want to see the Japanese perspective of the bomb. And that being said, this film aired in Japan to empty audiences. Do we talk about that in this country? No. No, we don't. No one went to see it in Japan. So, brilliant film, disappointing from messaging because it pushed what I think is a subtle pro-fascist, pro-socialist, not contradictory, sort of messaging while pretending to be, I guess, something deep. That's what I got.
Yeah, that's real.
I think, I don't know if 99 Crime is still here, but I think he said he would see it. I don't know if he ended up actually seeing it or what his thoughts were.
You might want to spoiler tag that on Discord, by the way.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, what are your thoughts out there? I want to hear thoughts. How do I spoiler tag this in post?
You'll have to delete it and then post it again, but post it on Discord, not the restream, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, gotcha, I get you.
Yeah. Do you want to make a spoiler on Discord?
No, what's the code?
It's 2 vertical bars around the sides of the link.
Okay.
Or /S.
Does that work too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Nice. All right. 99 Crumb says, I'm here. I didn't see it yet. Okay, yeah. That's cool. It just came out. So yeah, I felt like I had to do this. Kai says, the only one I have is likely to start a more political discussion, so I'll save that for the Discord. Yeah, let's go talk on Discord. I have so much more to say. I left out, dude. I have plenty more to say than I said. There's actually much more craziness in there on the politics side of things that I left out because, got to make the point succinctly. So.
You said, have you seen Grave of the Fireflies?
That's a Studio Ghibli film, and I have not seen it. I heard it is one of the saddest films ever made, And if you want me to endure that cry fest, you know, I will do it one day after I've recovered from this film. And that's Japanese, by the way, which makes complete sense. But it's a... If you haven't seen anime, by the way, if you want to know what post-trauma, collective post-trauma looks like of the bombs, go watch some anime. There's always an atomic bomb reference in, like, pretty much every movie. Or every show, like, silly shows. And it's always portrayed in this, like, devastating way.
I always thought that Attack on Titan, when they kind of like become Titans, I was like, oh, it kind of always reminded me of that. But.
Yeah, so no, that's a straight up reference. And what are the Titans? See how they do?
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
So I'm not up to date, right? But I don't want to spoil anything. But like,
I'm not up to date either.
I guess if you know, you know. You know what I'm saying? like the entire situation is well, okay. One thing I could say is, you know, it is about large weapons, right? And about the control of large weapons specifically. I don't want to, I guess I can't say more than that, I'm going to say, but, you know, I'll say it's reminiscent of, you know, events. I'll say.
There's like so much of anime. Like that's just one example. Like identifying the bomb with the Titans. Like you could. I actually. It's actually a topic that I have written down for a future episode. Is talking about Japanese filmmaking and the bomb, because it's like a collective trauma, man. Like every anime feels the need to reference the bomb and its destructive and scary and, like, you know, terrifying power. Even if it's for a moment, they're still going to do it. So, and people in Japan feel very strongly about it. You go read comments on YouTube videos about the bomb, you'll find a lot of really sad things. You know, my mom was just a secretary at some random company. Why did she have to die? Questions the film doesn't even want to touch. Doesn't even touch. Pretty crazy to me. Maybe there's an answer. Yeah. What?
Yeah. 99 Crime said, have you seen Barefoot Jen?
No, I have not.
And Stephanie said, it is really sad, referring to Graveyard.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've heard that it's like even the toughest of people cry during that film, so I'm sure I will cry. 99 Crime says the colony drops in Gundam are an obvious reference. Oh, Gundam. Okay, yeah. I haven't seen it, but
me neither.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Is it in Naruto?
Mm-hmm. It's in every anime.
I haven't watched Naruto. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Some villains, their power is basically atomic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. And actually, I should say one more thing. Just so, again, we cover this for the people just coming in. The film addresses the fact that Oppenheimer felt bad about it, but it doesn't address it intellectually. That's the subtle propaganda. Like, it's just a feeling, and the feeling's ambiguous, and there's no teeth to it. It's just like, I feel bad. It's almost like the weight of someone who had to do something, but there's no further exploration. It turns into a political thriller after that. You know, about how his security clearance got stripped. Boo-hoo. You're literally friends with communists. All of your friends were communists. Literally all of them. Literally every single one. You literally had no non-communist friends in this film. Literally. So, you know, the fact that you weren't literally card-carrying doesn't really help. Okay. Well, I hope this is an advertisement, as we wrap this up, an advertisement for learning history. I would not be able to... I would probably not understand anything in which I did when watching it if I didn't know history. And a lot of the history that I knew in this is stuff I learned outside of school. So, you know, pick up interesting books. Like, you know, just find a subject that's fascinating and pick it up. Like, you know, I recommended this book earlier, The Glary Lady Winked, which is about the New York Times. But also pick up this book called Wheelin' and Dealin' by, what's his face? Bobby Baker. Or Robert Baker. who was the second hand to LBJ, to Lyndon Baines Johnson. This is a memoir of someone who basically grew up in the Senate. Very eye-opening. Also very eye-opening about other stuff. But, you know, I don't know what to say. To be a good citizen, you need to know things. So.
Yeah, I've recently gotten back into reading. Well, sort of. Yeah, I guess I'm reading more, I guess, than before. I guess like on a regular basis now. It's kind of crazy. Well, you know, back in the day when I used to read, it was like in fiction, right? Not reading nonfiction. It's like, man, there's a lot of. It's so dense. You know what I'm saying? It's like you read some page, you gotta like sit down and think about it for a little bit. Like, all right, what did I just read? There's so much information on a page. And the thing is, it's so cheap, relatively speaking, right? You buy a book for, you know, however much money, and then that book, you know, contains so much. But you should drop some recommendations of books aside from what you just said in the chat when it's done.
Yeah. I mean, I could drop a billion books. The thing is, I'm particularly interested in Cold War era, you know, stuff, because that's the birth of the empire, in my opinion. You know, that's like the coming of age of the U.S. empire. It's very important to understand that era to me. So. You know, I can drop a ton of recommendations. I can drop YouTube channel recommendations. I can drop any recommendation. So, you know.
Okay.
Sweet. Last comment from producer wife Stephanie England, who is my wife. That was a confusing comment. Which is so different compared to real life Oppenheimer. Yeah, Oppenheimer he wasn't the most explicit person, like in terms of like lying out like a, you know, an A to B to Z, like, you know, recounting of his interior life, right? But he had a lot more to say than just emoting, you know? A lot more specifics to say. So that's why I'm like, why didn't you just include some of that? Why did you leave it ambiguous? I wonder. So yeah. Oh, and shout out also to there's a dude named this is actually a dude I recommend following. His name is Mark Robert. He's actually mostly known these days as a JFK assassination researcher, but he's also a filmmaker. He has a YouTube channel called America's Untold Stories, which is phenomenal. You should go check it out. But the great thing about Mark Robert is that he said something once that actually, as I've reflected on films, has been, because he's a filmmaker. He wrote a famous film actually that got stolen from him. It was an Adam Sandler film. I can't remember, like a film with Adam Sandler in it, not an Adam Sandler film, but he actually he proved that it got stolen from him in court. He won the case. But famous movie. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But he's a filmmaker, and he said one thing that he's noticed as a pattern in cinema is where the British tell American history, there's propaganda. And I mean, I didn't just take his word for it for this one, but then I was like, oh, okay, British telling American story, propaganda. That's what we found here. So, there you go.
I wonder why that would be.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of reasons why that could be. I'm not an expert in that, but there's a lot of reasons I can think off the top of my head as to why that would be.
Mm-hmm. Before we end, one last thing. What was the prompt for this thumbnail?
Oh, for the episode art. Yeah. That's I think I typed in. What? Actually, I can look it up exactly.
What's in the background? The architecture in the background. What's going on there?
Yeah, I thought that was weird. I don't know. I don't know why I did that. It's like a future city or something. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's like I don't know.
So I typed in pro-nuclear propaganda featuring Oppenheimer. There you go.
Huh. I wonder if that structure like means something, or literally just random. Like it's just some like garbage that got turned out.
Yeah, who knows with AI? But by the way, casting, it was on point for literally everybody. Fermi looks like Fermi. Oppenheimer looks like Oppenheimer. Very great casting. Great film. Like literally spectacular film. But too bad it's full of propaganda.
Hey, who's Oppenheimer played by?
Cillian Murphy.
I don't know who that is. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, funny enough, this is the highest attendance we have on Rumble for all day. It's tuning in at the end. Literally, like the number just like went up by a bunch, like literally like 5 seconds ago. Sup, Rumble people? You're a little late because the show's ending, unfortunately. But you can always check out the VOD after it's done, and check out our channel for other topics like this or just other random stuff that we put out. It's all great stuff, and that goes for everybody. If you want deep dives into anything, we do that all the time. So if you enjoy it, subscribe, like this episode if you like it. It would be much appreciated. And finally, shout out to our awesome local supporters, some of which have been in the chat. 99 Crime, Kai Kairos, and then we also have Rob Sharma, and we have Post. And thank you to all those people for making this show a net zero show. Such that we don't lose money. We don't make money, but we don't lose money. And thank you guys for that. So if you want to join them, we really could use every dollar above net zero to help us to push the message out. We need desperately to put some advertising out there, and some other stuff, and it'd be great if you could help us, and you get a whole bunch of perks that you can find at mixedmedia.locals.com. You can also go to mixedmediapodcast.com to find links to pretty much anything you could possibly want, including the Discord, which we're going to be continuing the conversation on there.
99 Crime is already typing. There's already messages in the Discord.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Discord about to be popping. See you after the show.
All right, see you guys. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching and listening.
Look, tell a man no trouble, I don't want beef, man, I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then dead I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We back, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight.